Okay, we've got a lot on the agenda tonight, so we'll get straight into it. Are there any apologies? No apologies?
Mr Mayor, sorry, yes, there is. Derek Tuplin, Derek Tuplin, Councillor Tuplin. Who else was there? Councillor Beatty will be late. Councillor Richards will be late, and Councillor Lowe may be late. I think he's on his way, so it must be the traffic. Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Nobody else? Okay, receive declarations of interest. Councillor Ingle.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. On the motions number 16, number 1, the first one, I need to declare a personal and prejudicial interest as my son Luke works at the Royal Mail. So I will leave the chamber as that item is discussed.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Exactly the same motion. I'm a post office pensioner, so I've got a real interest in these matters. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? No? Okay, item 3, to approve the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on 9th of September and the extraordinary meeting of the Council on the 4th of November. All those in favour? Yep. Receive and that's it from the Mayor. Sorry, we've got some more to sign over. God, blimey. Never had it, yeah, never had it before. Only one notice, really. It's a late one that come in. Basically, I just want to say on Rosemary Jackson's retirement, just saying that she'll be sadly missed. When I first came a councillor, she was very, very friendly to myself, and I think she's to everybody else. So there you go. Just at all. So I just want to say wish you the very best, and I'm sure everybody else will agree with me and stuff. Is it comedy night tonight or something? No. Okay, to receive any statements from members. Receive any statements from members of the Council Cabinet. There are none. Receive any questions from the public to members of the Council Cabinet and the answers to those questions. We do have 10 questionnaires, and we do need to restrict this to 30 minutes, so we need to, pretty much get through it pretty quick. So if you can get through it quickly, and also any supplementary, keep it actually very to the point, really. The first person is Simon Bacon on waste tonnages. Mr. Bacon.
Good evening. Can the Cabinet member with waste in his portfolio confirm that no agreement has been put in place between the Council and the RRS Waste Incineration Company to supply a minimum yearly tonnage of waste, which, if not met due to the falling waste levels and increase in recycling, would lead to an agreed gate fee per tonne being paid by the Council for the unused waste quota, i.e. will we pay money for nothing?
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good evening, Simon. Yes, I can confirm that there is no agreement in place between the councils and RRS. The plant has been sized to allow for both city and county councils to increase their combined recycling composting rates from their current levels to 55%, which exceeds the national target for 2020 of 50%. There is agreement between the councils that any spare capacity created at the plant by Derby City Council improving on this target will be taken up and paid for by Derbyshire County Council, as the county produces waste in excess of the plant capacity, and therefore there will not be any risk that the council will pay money for nothing.
Do you have a supplementary to that?
Can the councillor with waste in his portfolio just confirm that that won't change in the future, please?
Councillor with the waste in your portfolio. And do you have waste in your portfolio?
I'll have a look, Mr Mayor. The answer is there can't be any absolute guarantee, but it would require a change in the contractual arrangements, so there would be plenty of notice if such a change was proposed.
Okay, and your second question?
Due to the controversial nature of the proposed waste disposal project, which has caused widespread concern to Derby residents, what penalties would the Council face in terminating this joint waste agreement with Derbyshire County Council?
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Although not yet signed, the inter-authority agreement between Derby City Council and Derbyshire County Council will continue for the same period as the project agreement with the contractors. There are no reasons for one council terminating the inter-authority agreement while the project is continuing, since it sets out that the councils agree that any decision to be made or action to be taken shall be made or taken so as to obtain the maximum advantage for both authorities. And should one authority gain more than the total benefit arising, giving rise to a loss to the other authority, a form of compensation should be agreed between the authorities at that time to rectify the issue. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Supplementary to that?
It's just to ask, can I have those in writing, please, those answers? Thank you.
Can we get those in writing? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, it's Tony Dunn on Democratic Process at Planning Control Committee, and it's to Councillor Wood. Mr Dunn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Evening, Councillor Wood. At the Planning Control Committee on the 15th of October 2009, one of the items discussed was the proposal for the waste disposal centre on Symphony Lane. A lively debate of this very important matter for around 1.5 hours, after which a vote was taken. Of 5 councillors present who were eligible to vote, 3 abstained, 2 voted against the granting of permission. The vote was seemed to be quite clearly lost. Then one of the councillors requested the application to come back to the PCC at a later date, which the chairman duly sanctioned. My question is, how can this be allowed when the vote was clearly defeated? And if this proposal is allowed to stand, how can Derby City Council in any way justify this as a democratic decision, please?
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, Mr Dunn. I agree with you, Mr Dunn, that there was a lively debate of this very important matter, followed by 1.5 hours, after which the vote was taken. As is customary, the vote was taken on the motion that the officer's specific recommendation, which was to grant permission subject to particular conditions. That motion was not carried. It is understandable that some members of the public thought at this point permission had been refused. It had not. Permission had neither been granted nor had it been refused. It was therefore necessary for a new motion to be put, calling for permission to be either refused, permission to be granted but with changes to the recommended conditions, or that the decision be deferred. Councillor Kerr quite correctly moved that the decision be deferred pending further information. Her motion was duly seconded, put to the vote and carried. Study of the webcast of the committee's deliberations shows that the above account to be accurate. It also shows that I made a point of stating to the committee, for the avoidance of doubt, what had taken place. Thank you.
Supplementary to that, Mr Dunn.
I do have, Mr Mayor. So, just to clarify for me, I'm not very bright, perhaps. In the case of a planning decision made where the public object, they've got no chance, but if you want to just carry on, you just carry on at will, even if it's been defeated. And I hear what you say, but if 5 councillors voting against the motion, surely that must defeat the motion, and you know.
You're quite right.
Turn your mic off, Mr Dunn. Sorry.
You're quite right. When a motion is defeated, a motion is defeated. But that motion doesn't mean that planning permission has been refused. There is a difference between defeating a motion and moving a refusal. Sorry if that's not clear, but I've tried to make it as clear as I possibly can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Your next question, Mr Dunn, the waste treatment plant.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Is it, I presume it's to Councillor?
Councillor Carr.
Thank you. Good evening, Councillor Carr. Locally, a figure of some £20 million odd has been bandied about as Derby City Council's contributions towards the waste incinerator on Symphony Lane. And using the High Court President set in Nottinghamshire incinerator case to remove the commercial confidentiality factor, could the member make clear to the members of the public what exactly we are liable to receiving for our money exactly what are the terms and conditions of the contract, and could the member also ensure that all of the details of the costings are placed in the public domain and available for public perusal before the contract is completed, please?
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, Mr Dunn. Derby City Council is proposing to invest some capital into the waste treatment facility plan for Sinfin Lane. This capital injection will not be made until the plant is working and will be more than recouped by reduced costs over the life of the plant. There is no contract until both councils and the contractor have signed the agreement, and therefore it is an incomplete document and is covered by an exemption under the Freedom of Information Act. Once completed and signed, the contract will be accessible under the same rules on freedom of information requests as any other recorded information that the Council holds. More details about what can and can't be accessed under FOI can be found on the City Council website. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary to that?
I do, Mr Mayor. Yeah, so what you're saying is that the case that was used in Nottinghamshire for the contractual uncovering of information doesn't apply to you, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. No, that's not what I'm saying.
Turn your mic off. Sorry.
That isn't what I'm saying. I'm not completely familiar with the details of the Nottinghamshire situation, but our contract is not yet in place and therefore is exempt under the Freedom of Information Act. When it is signed, it will be available.
Thank you. And the next question is Linda Winter on Brindley Court. Mr. Councillor Troop.
Will the Council Cabinet Member for Housing and Public Protection confirm or deny that the Council has a report or any formal or informal communication with the managing agents of Brindley Court, Wilkins Drive, regarding building or fire safety?
Councillor Troop.
Thank you for the question, Linda. Yes, the Housing Standards section had detailed communications and correspondence with HLM Property Management, who are the managing agents, spanning the last 2.5 years, and recent correspondence with the freeholders Waterglen Limited, or more specifically the holding company Regis Group plc. Amongst this correspondence is a detailed fire safety risk assessment undertaken by Church Lucas in May 2008 on behalf of HLM that details the current failings in the fire safety measures at Brindley Court. In addition to this, HLM have also conducted a more general survey of Brindley Court that has identified about £300 worth of repairs to the communal parts of the building. Both HLM and Regis have made a commitment to address both the fire safety concerns and disrepair at Brindley Court, but have not yet instigated a programme of works or provided a firm start date. Due to concerns that these essential works have not commenced, the Housing Standards section served an improvement notice on Waterglen Limited at the beginning of October, requiring them to provide 1-hour fire containment across the whole building. Waterglen have appealed this notice, and we are currently awaiting a hearing date to be set by the Residential Property Tribunal. Following this hearing, it is the intention of Housing Standards section to serve a further improvement notice to secure any outstanding issues regarding general disrepair at Brindley Court. With regard to general fire safety measures concerning the communal parts of Brindley Court, and indeed any other block of self-contained flats, it is usually the jurisdiction of the Fire Authority to secure and enforce matters relating to fire safety.
Okay, quite a thorough answer. Have you got a supplementary to that?
Yes, I have. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I ask why, if it's been known about all this time, has nothing been done about it? Is it going to take a tragedy, as there was almost a week or so ago with the fire?
Don't know what's that, Mr. Councillor.
Well, as I've said, action is being taken, and we are pursuing getting this sorted out as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. Next question is Penny de Abreu on the empty property at the Struts Park Conservation Area. Minutes to Councillor Kerr.
Forty West Avenue at Five Lamps has now lain empty and neglected, approaching some 10 years or more. In view of the fact that the whole of Section 1 in PPG 15, together with paragraphs 3.16, 7.1 and 7.5 to 7.8 makes it clear buildings in conservation areas as well as listed buildings should not be neglected for whatever reason. With this in mind, please explain how are DCC meeting their obligations in respect of 40 West Avenue in the Struts Park Conservation Area?
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Penny. Good evening. The references to certain paragraphs of PPG 15 refer to the obligations on both private sector owners and local authorities towards the proper upkeep of properties within conservation areas. The Council is fully aware of its obligations in respect of the upkeep of its total building stock and is intent on meeting these within the limits of the resources that are available at its disposal. In the case of 40 West Avenue, it was originally acquired by the Council in 1984 when its site was needed as part of the route of the realigned Garden Street and as part of the proposals for improvements to the Five Lamps Junction. It's amazing how long that project's been going on, isn't it? Although planning permission was granted by the Secretary of State for these junction improvements as part of the Connecting Derby proposals, he failed to confirm the necessary compulsory purchase order in respect of additional land needed to implement these proposals at Five Lamps. There are currently no alternative proposals. However, one option is to review what changes might be made to the junction which may impinge on the site of this property, 40 West Avenue. In the meantime, the estimated cost of bringing the property up to a suitable standard for letting is approximately £50,000 for a potential rental income of around £3,700 per year. While I regret this property continuing to stand empty, this is clearly not good value for money for the Council, and the sale of the property is not appropriate at this stage. I know you have a further question about security measures, so I won't address the matter of security further here.
You have a supplementary to that, or do your next question?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Thank you. I think the Council have had long enough to sort out 40 West Avenue. You lost Five Lamps. It needs to be brought back into beneficial use. I'd like to know when that is going to happen. It cannot, for some, be held on abeyance for forever.
Sorry, is it leading to a question or is it a statement?
Okay. It is leading to a question.
Okay.
Why wasn't there a contingency plan in case we had this scenario?
Councillor Kerr.
Chair, the issue of traffic movements at Five Lamps hasn't gone away just because the scheme that had been put forward has not been able to progress. And as I said in my answer, there is still a potential for using some of the 40 West Avenue land for looking at alternative schemes in that area. And when there is work capacity to do that, and it's a high enough priority, I expect that it will be done.
Okay, and your next question on security at 40 West Avenue. To Councillor Kerr again.
How often does the Council check the security and monitor the condition of 40 West Avenue?
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you again, Penny. There is no set interval for the routine inspection of unoccupied properties held for highway purposes. The need varies according to circumstances which include its condition, vulnerability to vandalism and intruders, and whether there is a history of particular problems. 40 West Avenue is monitored in a number of ways, including frequent cursory inspections from the road, inspection as part of the formal condition monitoring of boundary walls, and attendance when requested by occupants of adjoining property. Security of the building has not been breached since installation of the current measures over 12 months ago, and in the past month work is being carried out in the grounds. The basic condition of the property is sound, and to ensure this situation is maintained, reinstatement of damaged waterproofing will be carried out in the near future.
Does that answer your question, or supplementary?
Supplementary, yes, please. How come then that the lead that was taken earlier this year has not been replaced? It's still, allowing, rain to get in.
Okay, that's the supplementary to Councillor Kerr.
The final point of my answer, that reinstatement of damaged waterproofing will be carried out in the near future, I think answers that point.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is Dorothy Skritek on Waste Framework Directive. It's Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In December 2010, the Waste Framework Directive changes to include congenital effects on the fetus in the womb, the unborn child, of sensitising elements such as dioxin, furans and other nanoparticulates. A judge recently granted leave to parents in Corby to sue their local authority for poor decontamination of polluted land, which resulted in that dioxin being spread into the air. This was then breathed in by the pregnant women, crossed the placenta and caused birth defects in many children. Dioxin is also caused by the burning of plastics, which is what both incinerator developers, Resource Recovery Solutions, Alias and United Utilities, and Cyclomax will do in order to make their syngas more calorific. In view of the UK government having signed up to the Persistent Organic Pollutants Treaty to reduce the creation of dioxins and other toxic organic micropollutants, for which DEFRA have stated there is no safe level, can the Council explain why their intention appears to be to increase the amount of dioxin in our air, and how they intend to meet the Environment Act, which pledges you to provide every citizen with the benefit of clean air?
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Dorothy. Thank you for the question. In September this year, the Health Protection Agency published a report, The Impact on Health of Emissions to the Air from Municipal Waste Incinerators. This is to support its statutory responsibility to advise the government and local authorities on possible health impacts of air pollutants. This report details the effects of particles, including nanoparticles, carcinogens and dioxins. It concludes that, and I quote, modern, well-managed incinerators make only a small contribution to local concentrations of air pollutants. It is possible that such small additions could have an impact on health, but such effects, if they exist, are likely to be very small and not detectable.
Thanks,
Supplementary.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's why RRS have admitted that they will bring deaths forward in seriously ill people. The supplementary, I've received a letter today. This may be a little bit sudden for you, Councillor Carr, from Mr. Laxton, who has objected to the Cyclomax incinerator, which is a similar process in Spondon. And he states that he's against the plans.
Is it actually a supplementary question or
leading,
rather than a statement? Because
it's leading to the question,
Councillor Carr's not actually had probably seen the letter,
yes,
so
yes,
maybe
I
you can let
intend to give him a copy as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the directives change in the European Parliament, and the Council of 21st May 2008 have decided that ambient air quality regulations and clean air for Europe, that this will follow, that Cleaner Air for Europe will follow, and it is hoped that following this consultation, the new regulations will come into force on 11th of June next year, before
Sorry, can you get to your question? Otherwise, you're going to take it off on somebody else. So can you get straight to your question now, then, please? Your supplementary.
There's no one left, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
And that upon this introduction, the air quality regulations of 2007 will be revoked. He has then said that application shouldn't be decided before June.
Can you go straight to the question now, please?
This is the next bit.
No, I want it now. Either the next statement is a question, otherwise it doesn't get answered. So it's up to you, really.
Thank you.
So straight to the question, or it doesn't get answered.
So as that's been decided in Parliament, as it's going to be decided in Parliament and by the EU, does Councillor Kerr agree that the incinerators should not be decided before 11th of June 2010 at the earliest?
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to make sense of all of that. But I think the answer to the question is we cannot afford to delay the current process because later on, as landfill tax credits rise, it will be costing this council a great deal of money. Also, delays to the project will also cost us a great deal of money. If regulations change, then presumably the permitting arrangements will be considered under what's called grandfather rules.
Okay, so sorry, but that's it. Thank you. Next question is from Colin Underhill on the dual bins in the city centre. Mr. Underhill's not here. Okay. So we'll send him written responsive for both those questions. Thank you. And that ends public question time. Okay, item 7. Receive any written questions about the business of the functions of the Derbyshire Police Authority, Derbyshire Fire Authority and Derby Homes. We have one. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I understand that Councillor Allen's answering this question as the Vice Chair. I assume then that this question is not important enough for the Chairman of the Fire Authority. Derby City Council is responsible for 33% of calls for service to the Derbyshire Fire Services and is covered by 15% of firefighters and less than 10% of fire tenders. Yet I understand we are considering reducing the service at Ascot Drive by removing one of the fire tenders and half the firefighters and moving them to Swadlincote, Buxton and Glossop. This equates to a 25% reduction in frontline firefighting appliances within the city confines. When you also consider that the city is home to a quarter of all Derbyshire people and that disproportionately we have a higher number of people thought to be at greater risk from fire, your consultation document under the reallocation of resources does not make sense when it states there is currently an over-provision at Ascot Drive. Reducing the fire service cover within the city by a quarter will cost lives. Will you please reconsider the proposal and keep Ascot Drive at its current strength?
The initial question, a member can be nominated for the purpose of speaking on that, on the Fire Authority, but not on the Police Authority. So, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's wrong to assume that the Chair of the Fire Authority does not regard this issue as important. Councillor Makin, the Chair, has asked me to answer the question on his behalf. Derbyshire is a safe place in regards to risk from fire, certainly in comparison to other fire authorities. The Fire Authority response to calls is to have one pump attending in 10 minutes and the second pump attending in 13 minutes. And for the benefit of those who like to see things visually, I've placed two isochrone maps to show the coverage in 10 minutes and in 13 minutes at the front to the left of the mace from where I'm standing. The actual number of incidents, not just fires... Sorry, Mr Mayor, I thought someone was trying to interrupt me. The actual number of incidents, not just fires, is around 14,000 a year, with Derby receiving about 4,300. So that's approximately 33%. Derby is covered by 3 whole-time 24/7 stations, Nottingham Road, Ascot Drive and Kingsway. The current establishment of whole-time firefighters in Derby is 108, supported by officers. The total whole-time establishment is 462 firefighters, therefore Derby has 23% of the whole-time provision, not 15 as stated in the question. And I took the liberty of asking our own staff what the proportion of population in Derby is compared to the county, and Derby has 23.89% of the population of the whole of Derbyshire's external boundary, so the provision is about right. Derby currently has 4 of the whole-time provision frontline appliances. There are 6 other whole-time stations and 33 retain units. That makes 10 whole-time stations, with 4 of them, or 40% of them, in Derby. The proposal is to relocate 24 of the 52 firefighter posts to facilitate the upgrade of 3 other county stations, therefore providing resilience across the county with more whole-time stations. Whilst one of the 4 appliances in Derby will be relocated, response to calls for assistance will be the same. The communities will still get the same number of fire engines to fires and other calls, but when the first engine is deployed from Ascot Drive, the second fire engine will depart from a different station. This is currently the normal practice for Kingsway and Nottingham Road stations. It will also ensure that Nottingham Road and Kingsway will be used more effectively in supporting calls. Because the activity levels, thankfully, are so low in Derbyshire, with our busiest station, Ascot Drive, only having an average of 2,000 calls a year, or 40 per week, or 6 per day, or 3 per duty shift, therefore 1.5 calls per pump, this is not an effective use of resources, particularly when it benefits from 2 other stations in very close proximity, that can provide appropriate response well within our attendance times of 1 pump in 10 minutes and the second in 13. There is no evidence to suggest that the reallocation of resources will cost lives, as we currently operate a mobilising system that provides support from surrounding stations, as is the case with Nottingham Road and Kingsway. The consultation closes on the 19th of December, Mr Mayor, and all comments are welcomed and will be considered. Mr Mayor, I've placed copies of the consultation document on the table at the front of the chamber, and it's also available on the Fire Authority website. I would like to encourage all members to respond to that consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Got a thorough answer there. Brief supplementary there, Councillor Graves.
Yeah, I think you appreciate I do have a supplementary, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much. Councillor Allen, your provided answer is trying to pull the proverbial wool over my eyes and the council chamber's eyes with your figures. You say Derby benefits from 108 whole-time firefighters, and then added, very briefly, supported by officers. Those 108, I suspect, includes non-frontline staff, mainly due to the headquarters residing within the city limits. Trading statistical information...
It's fairly long-winded supplementary there, Councillor. Can we...
But I am answering his points, Mr Mayor, and I would like you to accept that. Trading statistical information does not change the fact that provision for Derby will be reduced by fewer fire tenders being available within the city limits.
Councillor Graves, you really must get to the supplementary. Can you get straight to it, please? Thank you.
Well, the point is, Mr Mayor, that the fire service is trying to reduce the fire provision within the city. It is being supported by the 3 parties in this council chamber. There are 5 fire authority members on the fire.
So what's the supplementary question?
And I'm asking that people take heed of what I've said, because reducing the fire service provision within the city is wrong. There are 2 people per year.
Councillor, it's unfair to everybody else. I've been firm to everybody else, and you'll be no exception. So can you get straight to the supplementary? Otherwise, you'll lose the right to...
Do you think it's right, Councillor Allen, to reduce the firefighters from 15% down to 11% and fire tenders from 9% down to 6.8% within the city?
Councillor Allen.
That's a difficult question to answer, Mr Mayor, because the statistics quoted by Councillor Graves are wrong, as I said in my first answer. I will, however, say I support the restructuring of the Fire Authority, and the restructuring is out to consultation. I say again, please make your comments known through the consultation process, and the offer, Councillor Graves, of a personal briefing from the Deputy Chief, which you rejected, is still on the table. Thank you.
Okay, that's... Okay, we are on to item 8, to receive any written questions from non-council cabinet members to members of the council cabinet. There are 9 questions, and the first one is from Councillor Roberts to Councillor Jones on Derby and Derbyshire Economic Partnership funding. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Jones, Derby and Derbyshire Economic Partnership became Derbyshire Economic Partnership from the 1st of November 2009. What portion of DDEP funding was allocated to Derby City Council as a result of this change, and how is it envisaged that this will be spent and by whom?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Derby City Council and Derby City Partnership jointly prepared regeneration delivery plan 12 months ago that presented the case to EMDA, which is East Midlands Development Agency, to take over the former DDEP functions from April 2009. This document was agreed last year on the 1st of April, and the Derby City Partnership became the managing body on behalf of the Derby City Council for this role. For 2009-10, the amount of the former DDEP funding that's available to invest in the city is 4.175 million. This represents approximately 45% of the funding that used to flow to the whole DDEP area. In 2010-11, the indicative allocation to Derby is £3,779,000, approximately 41% of all former DDEP area funding. The City Growth Executive is the key group that determines how these resources should be allocated. Aside from a number of inherited projects that were live at the time of transfer of functions to Derby, the programme investment includes public realm improvements at Castlewood Boulevard, Midland Place and Moorledge, Derby Station area regeneration, an investment and development strategy to promote the city to inward investors, a sector development project to link training schemes to employer needs, a major ICT study called Lightspeed Derby, funding to support Derby's bid for the 2018 World Cup, investment in a major programme of festivals and cultural events, a shopfront and buildings enhancement scheme for the city centre.
Give a supplementary to that, Councillor Roberts.
I'm not entirely sure, Mr Mayor, whether the answer and by whom was forthcoming in that response. So I would like clarification of by whom, please.
The by whom, I think by that you mean who is functioning with...
To give clarification of who I mean by whom, it's a very simple question.
Well, it's by Derby City Partnership and the City of Growth Executive.
Okay. So my supplementary question then is, that is all handed over to a non-elected body, is it?
Councillor Jones.
No.
When is the elections? I want to stand.
Next question is from Councillor Roberts again to Councillor Jones. The question is on Employment Tribunal. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you for the heading, Mr Mayor.
You're welcome.
Councillor Jones, do you agree that whilst it is acceptable for the chair or a representative of an appeals committee to give factual evidence as required to a tribunal, that it is wholly unacceptable for a member of such a panel to then agree to appear as a witness for the claimant against the council? If you do agree, then what action do you propose to take against your fellow cabinet member who, in offering such support for the claimant, undermined the integrity of the appeals process by sitting on a panel when she had clear views that would undermine her impartiality?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I presume you are referring to Councillor Skelton, who was a member of an appeals panel which decided not to uphold a decision to dismiss an employee, but instead to impose a final written warning. Instead of the employee being reinstated in accordance with that decision, he was immediately suspended again. Councillor Skelton considered that she was duty-bound to give this factual evidence at the tribunal, and I do not consider this to be unacceptable. There is nothing to suggest that Councillor Skelton was anything other than impartial when she participated as a member of the appeals panel.
Supplementary?
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor. And I have to ask if Councillor Jones has the same difficulty that I do in understanding, and I have no problem that if you're on a panel and you're asked by a tribunal to give a factual representation, you go there as an impartial witness giving a statement of fact. Councillor Skelton was clearly put down in the newspaper reports, and I assume accurately, otherwise she'd have denied it, as a witness for the defence. That, in my view, and I hope you'll agree with me, Councillor Jones, is entirely wrong.
I'd like to respond to that, Councillor Jones.
Oh, if it was...
The question is, I hope you will agree with me.
No.
Next question is from Councillor Bayliss to Councillor Kerr in the Elveston District Centre.
Thank you, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Bayliss.
Good evening, Councillor Kerr. Could you explain why work on Elveston District Centre will continue with Phase 3, the Blue Peter to the Co-op, rather than Phase 2, the Co-op to the Roundhouse, and when that much needed work will begin? Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Councillor Bayliss. As you will appreciate, the cost for each phase of the improvement works is different. Some phases will cost considerably more than others, depending on factors such as the area to be improved, whether or not curb lines need to move, and agreements with private landowners and so on. Phase 2 is likely to be the most expensive, and certainly the funding identified for next year is not enough to complete this section. The decision was therefore made to carry out and complete the area known as Phase 3, rather than carry out only part of that known as Phase 2. The exact dates for the start of this work have not yet been decided, but I have asked that local members are told when this is known. I am also not able to say when further phases of work will take place, as further funding for the next stages of this project still needs to be identified.
Supplementary to that?
Of course, Mr Mayor. Is it not the case that the delays in this project demonstrate the lack of interest by the Liberal Democrats in Ulverston, and anything much in Derby South for that matter? And is it not true the reason for this phase being chosen is not the reason stated by the Cabinet member at all? It's because the shop of Councillor Judy Gins is in that phase in this particular election year. Isn't that scandalous, Mr Mayor, and worthy of Standards Board investigation?
Councillor Cairn, I'm Mr Mayor, not the chair as well, by the way, so thank you. Would you like to answer the question?
I'm sorry, Mr Mayor, if I was distracted and used the wrong terminology. My apologies to you. And regarding Ulverston District's renewal, it's nothing to do with interest or otherwise. This was a project that was put forward before I took on this role, and it was given to me as a project that was starting without the funding identified. Since I have taken over this project, I have managed to identify significantly more funding than had been done by the previous Labour administration, and we are continuing to search for that funding. We haven't given up, despite the turn down in the economy, which, to be fair, is making life more difficult. Regarding the choice, the recommendation came to me without any pressure from me, from the officers, as to which section should be done next, and it had not occurred to me that Councillor Gin's shop where she works is not in that area, and in any case, as it had come through from the officers, I was happy to accept it as their recommendation to me.
Councillor Bayliss, your next question to Councillor Troop on Durley Close site.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, Councillor Troop. Could the Cabinet member explain why the residents living near to Durley Close in Ulverston will have to put up with the blight of the part demolished site and wait until 2011 for the site to be finally cleared?
Councillor Troop.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bayliss. The redevelopment of the former Isle of Wight flats forms part of the Council's wider PFI programme, which is currently scheduled to start in July 2011. The Armouth house block has been left in situ at this stage because of the location of a mobile phone mast on the building. Negotiations are ongoing with Orange in relation to its removal.
Supplementary?
Of course, Mr Mayor. Does not this unacceptable delay again demonstrate clearly to the residents of Ulverston a lack of interest in them by the Liberal Democrat Cabinet, and the mismanagement by officers and the lack of leadership by you and the Liberal Democrat Cabinet member in tackling this particular issue? It's appalling, Mr Mayor.
More of a statement there, but we'd like to answer.
These matters are protracted when it comes to moving mobile phone masts, as the Council's found in other locations. We are moving it forward as rapidly as we can. If there are problems with the block remaining in situ at the moment, I'd be pleased to look at ways that we can find to get around those problems. And if the Council has any suggestions in that direction, I'd be pleased to consider them and try and take them up. For example, we could perhaps improve the security around the site.
Okay, thank you. Next question is Councillor Holmes to Councillor Carr, school meals.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's good to see you getting back down to earth in one piece. Recent reports suggest that freshly prepared school meals are under threat in Derby. Does the Cabinet member share the concern of parents regarding any changes to school meals that could lead to the supply of frozen, pre-prepared or processed foods instead?
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Celebrity chef Jamie Oliver's much publicised national crusade to improve the health and well-being of school pupils led to the school-based standards for school lunches legislation. This legislation has seen a shift from reheating convenience food towards preparing fresh food on site. There is a need for additional labour to prepare and cook these types of meals. Also, ingredient costs have risen. Currently, a school meal costs £2.75 to produce. However, the purchase price is only £2. Council officers, in partnership with a specialist catering consultancy, are carrying out a review into providing a cost-effective school meal service within Derby. The key aim of the review was to identify how to deliver the school meal service within its allocated budget. The school meal service has run at a loss for a number of years. The key aims of this review are to identify ways to deliver the service within its allocated budget, consider the introduction of new catering production methods which will deliver operational improvements, widen the menu choices available to customers, meet the needs of BME communities within Derby where there is an increased demand to provide culturally appropriate meals such as halal, and ensure a constant high level of food quality, temperature controls and consistency through a number of standardisation mechanisms. A Cabinet report will be prepared giving the various options.
Supplementary to that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Do you agree that we should be doing whatever we can to encourage cooking from raw ingredients rather than relying on processed and pre-prepared meals? And unless you can give me reasons to change my opinion, would this move merely confirm school meals under the Lib Dem Council will be no longer based on nutrition and choice, but on low cost?
Councillor Cole.
I would point out to Councillor Holmes that many of our citizens don't have children. Many of our children don't have school meals. A question that I would like to ask is, are all those people prepared to pay 75p a head to maintain the standards that he's talking about?
Sorry.
I have an open mind on the matter, and yes, we do intend to maintain fresh school meals as far as we can within the budget. No decisions have been taken, but I would ask that you look at all the facts, so including the subsidy of 75p a head, before we make a decision.
Councillor Holmes to Councillor Kerr. Next question, please. Backlog of road repairs.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In August this year, a 6-month action plan was put into place by the Council to address the backlog of road repairs across the city. Could the Cabinet member offer an update of the Derby Roads Partnership, state the current size of the backlog and the budget required to address it?
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I'm pleased to answer this question. I think it's an important issue for many of us. The Derby Roads Partnership has made considerable progress over the last few months. The quality and productivity of road repairs has increased to consistent and satisfactory levels following changes in work practice and operational management. An action plan started in August to address the outstanding permanent road repair works. It was based on an estimate of the amount of repairs needed, the budget available and maintaining the newly attained work productivity levels. Based on these assumptions, the programme was to complete 3/4 of the outstanding permanent repair works by the end of February. Completion of the remainder was to follow on starting in March. In June, a complete 6 months re-inspection of the road network had commenced to establish accurately the amount of the network needing to be repaired. It has always been stressed that this would be necessary to quantify more accurately the amount of work needing to be done. And this has shown that there are, unfortunately, significantly more defects than were originally estimated. A substantial element of this additional work is on a relatively small number of roads, mostly main roads, where large areas of carriageway repair are necessary. The rate of deterioration is always greater on main roads due to the heavier traffic, and this, coupled with last year's bad winter, has led to the increase in the number of repairs now found necessary. This increase will require more funding than anticipated, but it will be appropriate to fund a substantial proportion of this increase from capital finance within the local transport plan budget. On this basis, I am advised that there should still be sufficient revenue funds available within this budget and next year's allocations to complete the outstanding repairs. The increased level of work means that the full revenue funding identified for this is enough to undertake around 85% of the required works. The remaining 15% can be funded from next year's financial base allocation for routine maintenance, provided this is approved by Council in the 10-11 budget. Excuse me. The increased level of work, however, exceeds that which Carillion, the Derby Roads partner contractor, has based their programme and resourcing on for this financial year. Full completion of outstanding permanent repairs may not be achieved, therefore, until well into 2010-11. The partnership is currently reviewing the ability to accelerate work output, but taking care to ensure work quality and productivity are maintained. Officers are now preparing a detailed report for me to be available by the end of November, which will include more detailed information on the budgetary position, both revenue and capital, the timetable for completion of the outstanding works. I will share this report with leaders of the other parties and the transport spokespersons and the relevant Overview and Scrutiny Commission as soon as I have it, and will be pleased to discuss it in more detail. In addition, all members will be advised in early December of the revised programme and any effects in their wards.
We have supplementary, Councillor Holmes.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Councillor Kerr, you've repeatedly denied that the Derby Roads Partnership is in crisis when it quite clearly is. Does the fact that you are now telling us that the backlog of repairs has increased again to more than a year, and that I understand another £250,000 is needed, bringing the total of extra funding required to around 1.5 million, does not that clearly show that you've completely failed to manage the situation? Why should the public have any confidence in your ability to resolve this, Councillor Kerr?
Councillor Kerr.
Chair, luckily the public...
Chair, Mr Mayor.
Oh, Mr Mayor, I'm really sorry.
Give me some money now
But
for my charity fund donation.
I was thinking about the question, Mr Mayor. And I'm thankful that the members of the public actually don't look at these things in quite the same way as people are trying to make party political points. The contract certainly was failing, and it is now delivering. We always knew that it had a backlog to deliver because it had got into severe difficulties, but it is now picking that up and moving forward. The full costs I won't have, and I'm not quite sure how Councillor Holmes, you have them, until I actually get the report at the end of the month, and I'll be pleased to read that and share it with you at that time.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Banwaite to Councillor Jones on CCTV. Councillor Banwaite.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Jones, following our recent meeting regarding your proposal to remove CCTV cameras at Allington District Centre, where it was confirmed by officers that the camera at the Spider Bridge was not working properly, can you please explain why you allowed this camera, which overlooks Enthusiasm's youth centre and the parade of shops, to remain in a state of disrepair in an area of known gang activity, and will you now give a commitment to repair or replace it as a matter of high priority as demanded by local traders and residents, the police and Enthusiasm?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I met traders from the Allington District Centre together with representatives from the police, Community Safety Partnership, Labour ward councillors and the Labour leader on the 29th of October 2009. The meeting was arranged following the Cabinet's decision not to remove the CCTV cameras from Allington without first exploring the issues and listening to the local people. I wanted to hear firsthand about the concerns that traders had about crime and disorder and how CCTV was used to help combat crime and make people feel safer. The meeting with local traders allowed me to understand their concerns in detail, and it also gave me an opportunity to listen to emerging concerns which the police and the Community Safety Partnership have about gang activity and the increased sensitivity within that community. At the meeting, officers explained that CCTV camera adjacent to Spider Island Bridge was only partially functioning. Officers explained that the camera could not simply be repaired because it was no longer possible to obtain spare parts, and essentially the only option was to replace the camera with a new one. This particular camera covers an area within the district centre which can also be seen from other camera locations, and until now this has been sufficient. The report Cabinet had received, and which recommended the removal of this particular camera, indicated that it was not widely used and had not recorded any significant levels of activity over the past 3 years. It became apparent following the information provided by the police and the CSP that this camera was now more necessary than it had previously been. I accept this and appreciate the reasons behind it. Providing sufficient funding to maintain and operate public CCTV is not something which we can sustain. Costs are increasing, the current system is old and obsolete, and we need now to make some difficult choices about how we prioritise where our resources will be most effective in the future. I have therefore established a steering group which will involve the police and CSP together with representatives from each political party, so that we can be guided about the correct priorities to pursue. I intend to ensure that the steering group urgently consider the situation for all cameras within Allington District Centre, and any recommendations that the group make will be consulted on, including with ward members and the neighbourhood boards.
Councillor, do you have a supplementary to that? Councillor Van Wyk?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Just on the issue of funding, during the course of our public duties, myself and a number of our colleagues submitted a petition personally to Councillor Jones in her capacity as portfolio holder.
As long as it's not a political statement, Councillor.
It's not a political statement.
Supplementary question,
Can I please ask the Leader of the Council, following the Standards Board complaint she made against myself and other members of the Labour group in the service of their public duty, can you tell me, please, what's the latest cost of the bill to the lawyers investigating that Standards Board complaint, who are being billed by the hour?
Sorry, I don't think it's relevant to this question. Councillor, have you got a supplementary question to the original?
Yes.
Otherwise...
Yes, Chair.
Can you
Can you please... Mr Mayor.
Oh, dear.
Mr Mayor, can you please confirm the latest bill to the solicitors investigating that? Can that money be used instead...
Councillor, it's irrelevant. Sorry, sit down. Councillor Dinser to Councillor Jones on the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Jones, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000 policy was approved and adopted by the Council Cabinet on the 18th of February 2003 in accordance with requirements of the Office of Surveillance Commissioners to facilitate the carrying out of covert investigations in respect of the Council's regulatory and statutory enforcement powers. Whilst such operations are a necessary evil, they must have the full confidence of the public and be seen to be even-handed and measured in their application. The best way to achieve this is through public accountability and transparency. Can I therefore ask the Cabinet member responsible for surveillance whether, firstly, any changes to this policy have been made since 2003 and where they have been reported, and secondly, how many and what type of covert investigations have been undertaken during this period?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There have been updates made to the corporate RIPA policy following each of the inspections that have been carried out. They were in 2005, 2007 and 2009 by the Office of Surveillance Commissioner. Each update has incorporated in full the recommendations by that Commissioner following those inspections. As the report is restricted, it is sent directly to the Chief Executive by the Chief Surveillance Commissioner. The response to his recommendations, including the revisions to the policy, are reported to the Chief Executive. The Chief Executive then communicates directly with the Chief Surveillance Commissioner. In any event, as no key decision was involved in reviewing the policy, there is no need to refer this matter to Cabinet. You also ask what type of investigations. There have been 159 surveillance operations conducted by the Council since the Regulation Powers Act came in 2000. And these are in the areas of benefits, highways, that's CCTV on highways, environmental services, trading standards, human resources, social services, Derby Homes, fleet management, audit and risk management. And one case relating to trading standards. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Dinser, do you have a supplementary to that?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Thank you for that response, Councillor Jones, but I do find it not a full response in terms of my focus on public accountability and transparency. So can I therefore ask you, or yourself as a relevant Cabinet member, and the Council to ensure procedures are put in place without compromising confidentiality, because some of the issues may be of that nature,
to produce regular public reports to ensure proper scrutiny and accountability of any covert investigations undertaken.
Councillor Jones.
Within the restrictions that I understand the Act makes, yes, we will do what we can to communicate.
Okay, next question is from Councillor Turner to Councillor Allen on Sinn Féin Children and Young People Centre. Councillor Turner.
Councillor Allen. The opening of the Sinn Féin Children and Young People Centre was a popular event which recognised the dedication of our workers. So to what extent do you welcome and acknowledge the Labour Party's innovation of the Sinn Féin Children and Young People Centre in Sinn Féin Lane, Sinn Féin, as a very welcome example of Labour's policies in action which are addressing the needs of children and young people in the Sinn Féin area?
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any initiative that enhances the long-term prospects of our young people is to be welcomed, and children's centres are an important government initiative, but their success lies in the way they are implemented locally. Sinn Féin continues the programme of centre openings, and by April of next year we will have 18 in place serving the whole of the city. The potential for these centres was amply demonstrated by the enthusiasm of staff, children and adults from the community on the official opening day, which was reported to me. I have expressed my support and thanks to staff on other occasions and at other events. There is no doubt about my regard for the dedication of CAYP staff in this and in other services. We have provided high-quality facilities to ensure that staff are in the best position to provide high-quality services, and we certainly recognise their commitment to that aim. Staff teams working from that centre include the Locality 2 Sinn Féin Social Care Team, enabling good continuity of support for families across levels of need and within the city's vision for delivering integrated children's services. The Youth Service staff use the centre as a base for young people and their youth workers. Sinn Féin Community Children provide childcare and creche services and supports the sustainability of the nursery. In addition, services include training for the local community, a toy library, stay and play sessions, a childminder network and family visiting and outreach. Health services and out-of-school clubs will soon commence. The centre started operating effectively from April 2009, when the family visitors were fully in post, and it was formally opened on the 22nd of September 2009. Since June 2009, over 880 parents, carers and childminders have used the centre, and sessions for parents and children together have proved particularly popular. The Children's Centre and Youth Service staff have worked together to provide support for local teenage parents, which has worked well. Sinn Féin is currently the only centre where we can offer this combined service for groups. The Youth Service has also been able to use the centre to strengthen intergenerational links between young and older women in the area through regular knit and natter sessions, hopefully strengthening the community and reducing fear. The building is well used by local families and young people and enables a range of staff to be located directly in the area who would otherwise be based at some distance. The establishment of a children's centre goes much further than its primary aim of enhancing service for young children and has the potential to enhance the whole community and to be responsive to their needs. This does, however, come at a cost, and we have committed financial support to enable the other facilities to work out of the Sinn Féin Centre. It is a good thing for Derby, and we shall be rolling out further centres soon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a supplementary to that, Councillor Turner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, that list indicates that it was such a good thing that Labour did for Sinn Féin. Would you please explain why no member of the Cabinet, or indeed a well-known and older member of the local, a respected member of the local community, was not asked to do the job which the plaque in the building said you did? That is, open the facility.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is most unfortunate that I was not able to attend the event or any other event that week. I'll start again. It is most unfortunate that I was not able to attend the event or any other that week.
Let him finish so we can get through it then. Go on,
Thank you,
Councillor.
Mr. Mayor. It is most unfortunate that I was not able to attend the event, or any other that week, as I was suffering from suspected swine flu and was under doctor's advice to stay at home. The Head of Service for Childcare and Family Learning is preparing a visit for me to the Sinfin Children's Centre, and also a programme to officially open the other children's centres coming on stream during 2010. On the day, a substitute celebrity, the Director of Children and Young People Services, was delegated to open the centre in my absence. I was unaware that the plaque states that I opened it, and we'll take steps to remedy that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Could have asked me to open it. A-list, you know.
Yeah, I do not recognise you as...
Sorry, Councillor. I'm very camera shy, me, anyway. Moving on then to... that's all the questions to Council Cabinet Member. Moving on to item 9. Consider the minutes and recommendations to Council Cabinet dated 29th. Document 9.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
Under CP21, could I ask the Leader to explain the difference between food safety and food standards programmed inspections and offer reasons why there is such a large discrepancy in achievements of targets? That's document 9B.
83-09.
1.1, 1.2.
Councillor Jones.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think it would be more appropriate if the relevant Cabinet member addressed this.
Councillor Troop, would you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason that the target wasn't met for the food standards is that we were understaffed through this period of time, and we weren't able to tackle all the programme that we intended to. I can assure Councillor Holmes that the cases were tackled in priority order, so the serious cases and the medium, the moderate cases were tackled, and only the low cases were not. So in that respect, we did prioritise the effort that we had available. The food safety side, as you can see, did meet all its targets, and it's the service that does the scores on the doors type of inspection of hygiene in properties.
Let's speak on that, Councillor Holmes.
Could you just clarify the differences between the two, please?
Councillor Troop.
Well, I think, as I've said, the scores on the doors side is done by the food safety side, and the standard side looks at the such things as labelling and such like in premises.
Councillor Holmes, does that answer you?
I think we need some clarity, but I don't think we're going to get anything more substantial, so I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 80, anybody wants to be 84-09? No? 103-09? No. Councillor Jones, would you like to move item 9?
Thank you. Can I formally move that as printed, please?
Seconded? All those in favour? Okay. Item 10, to consider the minutes and recommendations of the General Licensing Committee. Councillor Redfern, do you want to move that?
Yes, just to move the recommendations of the committee to council.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
That goes all. Oh, sorry, Councillor Greve, I didn't want to comment.
I presume you're going through the documents one by one, are you? I'm wishing to speak on 1209.
1209, we can. Did anybody wish to speak on 1109? No? Okay, 1209, Councillor Graves.
This report and protocol is very welcome, Mr. Mayor, and has my full support. One of the main failings highlighted in the SMC report I chaired last year was the communication between enforcement agencies. It became apparent early on that the police, the fire service and the council worked almost separately of each other, and as a consequence performed very ineffectively. I look forward to a better partnership working, more effective enforcement and fewer problems due to licensing.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak? Okay. Moving on to 1309. Would anyone wish to speak on that? No? Okay, would you like to move? So we've already moved that up, haven't we? That's seconded.
Move as recommended.
Okay, seconded, yeah. All those in favour? Okay, let's move. Okay, item 11. Councillor Roberts, to move.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I very much welcome this review of Council's financial procedure rules, which has been looked at very carefully by the Audit and Accounts Committee, and I'd formally move.
Okay, anybody wish to speak on it? No? Seconded? Okay, all those in favour? Okay, that's moved. Item 12, consider report of the Director of Corporate Adult Services, urgent decisions. Councillor Jones.
Can I formally move that as printed, please?
Okay, that's seconded. Anybody wish to speak on that? Councillor Repton. You speaking on? No? Okay, that's all those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Item 13, to consider a report of the Corporate Directors Regeneration Committee, as also the Corporate and Adult Services on the World Cup bid. Councillor Jones to move.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say what a great opportunity this is for Derby to host or put forward a bid to host the World Cup. At the last council meeting, we heard a lot of information about what that would mean for Derby. Information such as the fact that in Germany, the cities that hosted were making about 150 million euros in income to the local economy. There's also the question of the legacy that this would leave for Derby, just as we can see if we go down to London, the area where the Olympics is going to be hosted, the infrastructure that's going in there, the same sort of thing, but on a smaller scale, would happen in Derby. We've worked closely in partnership with many people in putting this bid together, and we will continue to do so. By the 26th of November, the bid must be ready to submit to the FA in Wembley. And along with that bid, there has to be certain documents. These are all listed in the accompanying report. The main bone of contention last time is what we do with the stadium, and as you will see in that report, it does indicate that we are proposing that there is a letter sent from the council to the Football Association in Derby to give them some comfort about where we're at, and in the meantime negotiations are ongoing. Derby and our football club are not the only ones in this position. The other cities that are bidding have also got stadium extensions to sort out and have constructed. We, along with them, have been meeting up at the LGA and lobbying quite extensively to try and get fair play, if you pardon the pun, across the board. This has not been an easy process, and many of you will have read, and indeed it's mentioned in the papers, that the FA have now asked us to pay £250,000 along with our bid documents. And they are entitled to ask for these sorts of contribution. However, they have assured us that this will be the only thing they do ask us for. And again, in the papers, it's indicated that we would take that out of the 15 million that we were talking about last time. Financially, we can manage to find that from reserves in the short term. We've also been lobbying, as I said, government, and the government have written to us saying that they will be looking at sources of funding should we be successful in enticing the World Cup to come to the UK. I am therefore really happy to be able to move the motion that we've got in front of us, because that now covers off everything that we were debating last time. But I'm sure there are others that wish to contribute to this debate.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak on it? Councillor Repton.
Yes, I think this is a very exciting opportunity, and certainly it's one that both myself and my group support completely. However, I believe that local authorities shouldn't be the only ones taking a risk. with financial investment. Certainly as the rewards, if we are successful, can be massive, not only for Derby, but for the whole of the region. We'll never get sponsorship for repairs of our roads, repairs of schools, making sure that we have vital staff to fulfil services in the city. As we're already aware, we're already considering laying off X hundred staff, and finances are actually tight. And I know, although the timescale is very tight, I think we ought to be actively talking to firms in the city and commercial concerns, asking them to support us in this bid financially and to share that risk with us, because they certainly will be sharing the rewards, as the rewards will be great. And I would hope that many of the large firms that we have contact with will come up and contribute towards this £250,000 that we are prepared to invest, rightly so, I believe, on behalf of the citizens of Derby. But even at this late stage, I would certainly be urging Council to actively talking to other partners in this city who will be rewarded enormously if we are successful and the World Cup comes to Derby. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Allen.
I think you forgot to ask me to formally second it, Mr Mayor, but I would like to
Sorry,
speak
yeah,
as well.
You second that. Anybody else wish to speak on that? Okay.
Yes.
So second, you wish to speak? Well,
thank you. Just picking up the point that Councillor Repton's made about talking to other major players in the city. Oh dear, it's another one of those puns, isn't it? Sorry. We have worked in partnership. Some of the partners we've been talking to are the County Council as well as Derby County, the Derby Evening Telegraph, the University of Derby, East Midlands Trains and others. And we haven't finished looking for appropriate partners yet. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, all those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Item 14, to consider a report of the Chief Executive on corporate structure, position of the housing and advice services. I think this came up last time. Anybody wish to... Sorry, Councillor Jones, wish to move that?
Can I formally move that?
Is that
I reserve
seconded?
my right to speak.
Anybody wish to speak on that? Councillor Bayliss.
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you. At the last meeting, we had a bit of a debate on this because I intervened in terms of waving this through. And I think there has been some element of compromising regarding the position of housing services in the new structure. I, myself, am not quite satisfied with it in terms of this document, but having talked to colleagues across the parties and officers of both Derby Homes, where I'm a director, and within the council, it's fairly obvious that there is a very balanced debate, and I was the first to acknowledge that last time I intervened. Therefore, I would accept this as it stands, but I certainly think we will need to review this in the future, particularly when we get to the point where the Derby Homes contract will be looked at in 2011. And therefore, I'm quite happy and content with this as it stands. I think it doesn't quite go far enough as I would wish, but I'm quite happy to accept it for the moment, Mr Mayor.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak? No? All those in favour? No? Anybody against? That's carried. Item 15, consider a report of the Director of Corporate and Adult Services concerning the urgent non-executive decision made by the Chief Executive. Councillor Jones, can you move that?
Can I formally move that, please?
Is that seconded? Anybody wish to speak? No? All those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Item 16, to consider the following notice of motion. Councillor Williamson to move, Councillor Dinser to second. Councillor Williamson.
Mr Mayor, members will recall a few months ago that there was considerable concern articulated by staff working at the Royal Mail in the city following a decision to transfer some work out of Derby to Nottingham. There was concern about the implications on services in Derby and indeed the implications for jobs of local people who work in the post office. This is a fairly straightforward proposal, Mr Mayor, one which I hope we can get cross-party support for this evening. We're simply seeking Council's approval to call on the Chief Executive, or indeed to instruct the Chief Executive, to write to the Royal Mail's Chief Executive, seeking an assurance that no further work will be transferred out of Derby to Nottingham or any other location, and that every effort will be made to protect Derby's postal services and jobs in the future. And I therefore hope that we can agree this unanimously this evening, Mr Mayor, and get that letter dispatched as quickly as we can.
Councillor Jones.
Oops. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to say that Adam Wilkinson, the Chief Executive here, and I met with the Regional Director of Process Royal Mail, the Head of External Relations and Mail Centre Manager for Derby Sorting Office on the 30th of September 2009. This was shortly after the original news had been reported in the Derby Evening Telegraph. At that meeting, we asked about job losses and were informed that there were no job losses in Derby. Some mail has indeed been moved for processing to Nottingham, as they had capacity to deal with it. The movement of this mail is common commercial practice for the Post Office and the Sorting Office. There is, we are told, and I was told this again at a recent meeting, a £2 million investment in Derby over the next 2 years. This is to install new sorting machines and to increase capacity. We were also told at that meeting that the workforce in Derby is one of the best workforces in the country, and therefore we were asked the question, why would Royal Mail want to close or make anyone redundant if the workforce is so exemplary? We were assured that there were no jobs losses, no changes of terms and conditions, and the mail has simply been moved to Nottingham so that they can create capacity to put these new machines in. The Chief Executive and I were reassured enough to issue a press statement which was subsequently reported in the DET on the 2nd of October. In fact, only yesterday, Councillor Allen and I met, along with other officers, with some representatives from the Post Office Service. I again asked the question about the sorting office and the staff, and I was reassured again that there is going to be investment into Derby of £2 million. I therefore cannot see the point in writing when we already have the answers. Okay, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Banwaite.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to certainly pay a personal tribute to our postmen and women. I certainly share some of my own sort of personal experiences of working very closely with them. My father, actually, the day the story broke, my father featured in a story in the Derby Evening Telegraph the day after. My father joined the Post Office in the early 1960s when he was 17. He'd only been in the country a few years. And he actually retired as the second senior at the Royal Mail, and he still holds that record. And I was honoured, really, to have the opportunity to serve alongside him in the summer holidays when I was a student in his final year of retirement in 1996. And certainly my experiences of working alongside post staff on the front line, sorting and delivering mail, the one thing I came to grips with very quickly, it's a tough job. These are hard-working people from all over the city, from all wards, trying to do a difficult job. You know, if you've ever carried a post bag, as I have, parts of all over the city, from Littleover to Chaddesden, as a casual worker, they certainly deserve my admiration and all our admiration. One of the other important benefits of chatting to my father just when this story broke about the potential risk to these jobs and the concerns of union workers was that he told me his own experiences of grappling with management and his campaigns as a union activist on the front line. And certainly what came through, and it does slightly seem that Councillor Jones has already given into the fact that all the assurances she's given, she's already bought into them. What my father provided was a very interesting insight of a general mistrust with senior management, and based upon not necessarily ill intentions, but a lack of their understanding of what frontline postal staff go through. And over the years, my father certainly come across a number of issues where, especially newly postal executives, haven't really done the job, don't know the pressures of frontline postal staff, come into the service on high salaries, and then come about trying to introduce efficiency savings without actually understanding what the implications are. And we've seen many, many campaigns over the years, and I said my father was at the forefront on the picket line. I remember when he used to come home in the early hours of the morning with his gloves and mittens, especially in the winter, having been out on the front line. And certainly there is that kind of suspicion which carries forward. So it is a suspicion we've got to acknowledge. Now, as something personally I wanted to do, I wrote to the Chief Executive, Adam Crozier, and he has replied. And I sought reassurances, and on paper, in writing, those assurances have been given that no job losses will result. But I don't think that goes far enough. And I think Mr. Mayor, that I would welcome that we continue to put pressure on there. But certainly as a Labour councillor, with, let's say, certainly echoing my father's experience having dealt with management that have no experience of the hard work of our postal staff, that I would certainly urge caution on that respect, and we continue to put up the pressure. And I would certainly urge all my colleagues in this council chamber, even though those that are laughing and mocking on the Liberal benches, but I would certainly urge you all to support this motion. Let's keep up the pressure and support our postal workers. They're doing a very, very good job for the city. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My father wasn't a postman. But I think, like every elected member in this chamber, we've all slogged the streets, not just at election time, but during the year. We all say that, don't we? We've all discovered what it is like to walk down long roads, up long garden paths, to find, probably up steps, a letterbox which you've got to bend right over to get to at the bottom, and it's not big enough to take an election address, let alone half the stuff that postmen have to deliver. That experience gives us a tiny, tiny taste of what it's like for postal staff, day in, day out, 6 days a week, in all weathers, and much longer rounds, I suggest, than we have to endure, which we do in our own time. They have to do at a quick pace, in fact. The current management are insisting on 6 miles an hour, which doesn't account for knocking on a door and getting a signature. It just isn't possible. And that sort of work, and our appreciation of having been so near to it, gives me the greatest admiration, respect and support for what Councillor Banwaite calls the front line, I would call delivering the mail. Having said that, I think the public, the general public, and we are here to represent the general public, have a lot to answer for. We could all have, as they do in other countries, a post box at the end of our drives, if we've got them. It would make no difference to terraced houses, because in areas where there are a lot of terraced houses, the letterbox is right at the front. And on the ground floor of blocks of flats. We could help postal workers very easily, and it would make life a lot easier. And actually, when you think about it, the savings that will be caused by that, I've seen it work very, very well in New Zealand and other countries. The savings that could be made by that would do away with all the problems that the Royal Mail have got at the moment financially, and actually fill the pension gap. They could actually make a saving of that. So we, the public, should help our postal workers. I think even this council could help the postal workers. Can you imagine what it's like to have to walk all those miles every day, and you've accepted a cup of tea somewhere? The inevitable happens. You need a loo. And what is this council doing? All over Derby for the last 30, 40 years, we've been closing all the loos. Great. Yeah, we think we can control, don't we, and micromanage Royal Mail, but we can't even provide the basic facility that they need. I've even talked to postmen who wear catheters. Think about that. That is disgraceful, and it's down to this council that is actually happening. But worst of all, I do believe, and I do sympathise with what Councillor Banwaite said here, in recent years, some of the management that the Royal Mail has installed locally has been unaccountable and has brought in some so-called improvements. But we as consumers find that deliveries are later and collections are earlier. It's a rather cynical attempt, actually, to be able to fulfil the statistic that first-class mail gets delivered the next day. It ignores the fact that it could have been in a letterbox for 23 hours and 59 minutes, but it's still delivered the next day.
It's a load of rubbish, quite honestly, and in its time it was exposed. I used to chair an organisation called the Derby and Derbyshire Post Office Advisory Committee, and on that was the Chamber of Trade and the Chamber of Commerce, and a number of elected councillors. Councillor Graves was on it for a while. And exactly this sort of thing would have been reported to us, and it would have been put in the public domain. So there wouldn't have been an argument after a decision had been made. It wouldn't have needed Councillor Jones to go to a regional person. This would have come out into the open that way. But our cynical Labour government, what did it do? It abolished POAC. It abolished virtually every consumer organisation. It abolished the community health councils. It abolished the Telecommunications Advisory Committee. It abolished the Rail Passengers Committee. And, of course, it abolished the Post Office Committee. So if you think that by sending a letter to somebody somewhere, and you may get it back, is going to improve this situation, you've got another thing coming. It won't help the postal workers, and it won't help the service we're getting in this city.
Councillor Dinter.
Well, I think we've heard all our yesterdays from my colleague Councillor Banwait and Councillor Wood. I think the essence of this motion, though, is about talking about exactly the things that Councillor Wood and Councillor Banwait have said about support and recognising the hard work and the uncertainty that post office workers on the front line face all the time. And I hear Councillor Jones' commentary about the things that have been done and the assurances that have been given, and I do wonder whether it's taken a motion from Labour to full council to get that statement to be put to full council today. And if it has, that's a good thing. What I want to say is that this motion is still relevant in the sense that if we want to be doing all the things that Councillor Wood talked about, and to show solidarity with not only work remaining in Derby City in a time when there's unemployment afoot everywhere, but significant amounts of work moving, like 750,000 items of post, is not small bits. So I think some letter confirming that this sort of the 2 points will be maintained, and to keep that support in the public about the City Council is on the side of the postal workers, is on the side of people who, frankly, don't often get paid that well and are doing a job which a lot of us, as we do, on our occasions when we're doing our own leafleting, know how hard it is and it can be difficult, particularly, as Councillor Wood says, when you're bending over. So I would actually urge the Council to support this statement, this motion, because it does allow instilling confidence in our postal services and keeping them local and ensuring that they know quite clearly and quite explicitly by us unanimously supporting this motion that we are concerned about the work of those individuals being maintained in the City of Derby, and we will do whatever we can and do more to ensure that this sort of concern and uncertainty is dispelled, and we support our postal workers in Derby.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. I think several... Mr Mayor. A number of people are getting this completely around their necks. And while we're on the All Our Yesterdays, I've done my stint of sorting at post offices, part-time, every Christmas for a number of years when I was an impecunious young student. The purpose of the modernisation that the Royal Mail are doing is to allow more sorting machines to free up postmen to do the postman delivering rather than the sorting. When I was sorting, we were always very envious of the students who got the outdoor jobs because they could get out into the country. We had to sit in the sorting office and do it. They're investing, I've got the press release here, £5 million on installing new sorting machines at Derby. As soon as those machines are in, those 750,000 items will come back to Derby, and the postman will be allowed to go out delivering the mail rather than sitting in a room sorting it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to comment on the bottom of page 4 there. Seeking assurances that no further work will be transferred out of Derby to Nottingham or any other location. I raised this with post office representatives this week, and they would not give such an assurance, nor will their chief executive, because it is normal practice where there is high levels of demand in one post office to move it to another office that has capacity to deal with it. Significant amount of work, we are told here, moved from Derby to Nottingham recently to create the capacity within the local post office to improve the working arrangements there. It does not refer to the significant amount of works that have been moved into Derby from Nottingham on previous occasions when Nottingham couldn't cope. Nobody running that business will give you an assurance that they will stop moving work from one office to another. It's business operational sense, and I'm sure my colleagues will see that. Thank you.
Councillor Williamson, I think does anybody else wish to speak? No? Would you like to sum up? Before we move it to the vote?
Yes, I would, Mr Mayor. Can I start by saying that the Labour group wants to stand up for Derby and stand up for Derby workers, and I call on colleagues in the Conservative group and in the Lib Dem group to actually join with us in standing up for Derby and standing up for Derby workers. Surely that's what we're elected to do. And my concern, Mr Mayor, in spite of all the assurances that Councillor Jones has managed to acquire from the management of Royal Mail, is that the fact is, when you are moving the quantity of work that we've seen moved out of Derby, it could very well be, and I hope I'm wrong, but it could very well be the slippery slope. And I'm therefore not prepared, and the Labour group is not prepared, to simply accept reassurances from management behind closed doors, not in open session. What we're seeking here today is a very clear commitment from all parties in this chamber to get a commitment from the Royal Mail. And what's wrong with that? If you believe in standing up for Derby, if you believe in standing up for Derby workers, as the Labour group do, you will have no problem whatsoever in supporting our motion tonight, Mr Mayor. And I have to say, if it was down to, mealy-mouthed management assurances, then the Hoot campaign, the very successful Hoot campaign that the Labour group led in partnership with the Derby Evening Telegraph to actually save inland revenue jobs in this city, would not have been successful. Those jobs would have been transferred. So frankly, to simply say, well, we had a meeting behind closed doors with management and they'd give us an assurance, is not good enough. So I call on everybody in this chamber, Mr Mayor, to support us. And, some of the comments I've heard from earlier contributors led me to think, well, maybe they will be supportive. Surely they shouldn't have any difficulty with supporting this motion. If they've already had the reassurance, then what's wrong with supporting this motion tonight to get a more public assurance from the Royal Mail? And, Councillor Wood made a good contribution until he got to the when he saw red on the screen there. Maybe that's what sort of put him off his stroke a little bit there. Because, Councillor Wood, we can all trade, bad decisions from different governments. And when we're talking about scrapping the bodies that you talk about, what about the scrapping of the democratically elected Greater London Council? What about the scrapping of the metropolitan county authorities, democratically elected institutions, providing an excellent service?
Keep it to the point, Councillor Williamson.
I am keeping to the point. I'm dealing with Councillor Wood's comment, Mr Mayor, if you don't mind. So don't come here and trade those sorts of insults, because that really is not the point. What we're looking for today, Mr Mayor, is to not look to the past, but to actually move forward. We know that we're going through an economic downturn at the moment. We know that unemployment has increased. The Labour government has done a lot to keep people in employment. This Labour group, when we put forward our alternative budget, wanted to do more at a local level, but regrettably you wouldn't actually consider that. Stand up for the people of Derby, as we are calling on you tonight. Stand up for Derby, stand up for the workers of this city, and support this motion, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, move that we have a recorded vote.
Okay.
Mr Mayor, will members of the Council please indicate whether they are for or against the motion, or whether they are abstaining as I call out their names. Councillor Allen. Councillor Banwaite. Councillor Baxter. Councillor Bayliss. Councillor Berry. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Kerr. Councillor Carr. Councillor Shearer. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dinser. Councillor Gins. Councillor Graves. Councillor Grimmadell. Councillor Harwood. Councillor Hickson. Councillor Higginbottom. Councillor Hurd. Councillor Holmes. The Mayor. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Hussain. Councillor Ingle. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jennings. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keane. Councillor F. Khan. Councillor R. Khan. Councillor Latham. Councillor Leeming. Councillor Lowe. The Mayor, Councillor Marshall.
Abstain.
Councillor Nater. Councillor Nath. Councillor Poulter. Councillor Rawson. Councillor Redfern. Councillor Repton. Councillor Roberts. Councillor Shankar. Councillor Skelton. Councillor Troop. Councillor Turner. For. Councillor Webb. Councillor Williams. Councillor Williamson. Councillor Winter. Councillor Wood.
Oh, it's a good one. 16 for, 15 against. So it's the motion's carried. Sorry.
Could I, excuse my ignorance, could I ask a question for clarification?
Go ahead.
Why would anybody with the interests of Derby at heart not want to seek clarification from the Post Office?
Sorry, we've moved on now. So, okay. Next motion: Councillor Williamson to move, Councillor Banwick to second. Councillor Williamson.
Mr. Mayor, I think everybody is aware of the dreadful activities of a particular clamping company that's been operating in Derby, certainly for the last 6 or 7 months. And this motion is very clear and is looking for 2 ways of actually helping to address the problems that many local motorists in this city, and indeed visitors to Derby, have experienced at their hands. And I hope that we can, at least on this issue, Mr. Mayor, although we didn't get cross-party support on the last motion, we will at least get cross-party support on this motion tonight. The first part, really, that I want to speak to, Mr. Mayor, relates to the need for some sort of management protocol to deal with the way private car parks are actually managed in this city. And what I would like to see, and hope that we'll get support from Council this evening for, is a management protocol that will deal with the issue of penalty notices, the use of clamps, the way in which appeals against penalties are actually dealt with. Because at the moment it seems that the particular company in question are exploiting really loopholes in the law and the inadequacies of the Security Industry Authority to indulge in a money-making racket. And it is nothing short of a racket, Mr. Mayor. And I think that if we were able to invoke some sort of protocol between all of the private car parks in the city, it would give some reassurance to local people and deal with some of the quite iniquitous ways in which some people have been, or many people indeed, have been dealt with. At the moment, anybody who is clamped or has a penalty imposed upon them, certainly with the company I'm thinking about, City Parks Management, and everybody that I've spoken to who has appealed against it, have actually had their appeals rejected, Mr. Mayor. And therefore, I do think that it is important that we look at trying to bring these private companies online in order to try and deal with some of the problems that the way in which these car parks have been managed, and hopefully, offer some comfort to people that the sort of treatment that they've been subject to in recent months will not be repeated in the new year. It's good to see that the government in the Queen's speech is proposing some further tightening of the legislation which will deal with some of the worst excesses of clamping companies in this country. But until such time as that gets onto the statute book, and regrettably Conservative peers in the House of Parliament have said they're going to try and frustrate all of the measures that are contained in the Queen's speech, this might be one of the casualties of a very vindictive Tory-dominated House of Lords, but we hope not. That doesn't, however, prevent us from doing something here in the city on that particular issue. The other aspect I wanted to deal with, Mr. Mayor, and what the motion deals with, is the legal remedies that are currently available. And what we're seeking here is to call on our legal officers to look into all the various legal remedies that are available, including the use of antisocial behaviour orders. Now, that might sound a bit extreme, it might sound rather odd, but when you hear some of the accounts of the way in which people have been treated at the hands of these clampers, then it quite clearly does amount to antisocial behaviour and therefore merit an antisocial behaviour order. Because I've spoken to literally dozens of people who have been the victims of this particular car park clamping company, and they've been threatened and they have felt very intimidated. There have been occasions when the clampers have concealed their identity. They have come after dark, very often, when people have parked and sought to take their car away, and then found themselves subject to a position where they felt money was being demanded from them with menaces. And in spite of the fact that the notices on the car park stipulate that all major credit cards are welcome for the payment of any penalty notices, in every single case that I've dealt with, and it literally amounts to dozens of people, not one single individual has been able to pay using a credit or debit card. They've been refused and they've been forced to pay in cash. I've heard accounts of young women being frog-marched down to cash points. I've heard accounts of young women being abused, sworn at, and generally intimidated in a very, very nasty way. I've come across cases where people have had their cars towed away. In one particular instance, a couple who I've spoken to live in Etwall, both of whom are very disabled, and their carer, who was their daughter, had the car clamped and then towed away because she was told she would have to pay £175 to release it. She told the clamper that she didn't have that kind of money about her person and that she would need to go and borrow it from somebody. She made contact with her boyfriend. When she returned, however, which took some 2 or 3 hours later, she found that the vehicle had been towed away. And she was told then she would have a bill of in excess of £350 and that the bill would increase at a rate of £25 per day. Now, this is just frankly unbelievable in our city. It's something that we've never witnessed before. And of course, the other thing which is worth bearing in mind is that many of the people who have been clamped are on extremely restricted incomes because it is conveniently located just around the corner from the job centre, and therefore a lot of people who are looking for work or signing on actually use that car park to park whilst they go into the job centre. And we know that they've been clamped for very flimsy reasons, touching a white line, on the grounds that, when the explanation has been sought, that they are taking up more than one parking space, when the car park is actually half empty. Other people have been clamped when they're 1 or 2 minutes over the stipulated time. And sometimes people have had to wait for interviews in the job centre and have found themselves literally unable, because of the interview process, to get back at the precise time. So I do think that action is required. I think that the behaviour of the clampers is entirely unacceptable and does merit, as I've already said, Mr Mayor, an anti-social behaviour order in the appropriate circumstances. I have to say, Mr Mayor, though, in conclusion, that I'm very disappointed with the Council and Councillor Kerr in particular, that when I discovered that this car park did not have planning permission and sought an intervention from the Council to take enforcement action against the car park, that request fell on deaf ears, despite repeated requests to do so. And had action been taken when I first raised this with the Council, then dozens of people would have been saved the inconvenience, the harassment, the intimidation that they've been subject to after I'd actually brought that to the Council's attention. Indeed, the case that I mentioned a moment ago about the elderly couple living in Etwell, whose carer, who lives in Derby, had her car clamped and was unable to get to see her parents to provide the support that they required, and her mother was actually unable to get out of bed, and her father was so frail he was unable to help her to get out of bed. So she had to spend 2 or 3 days before she was able to actually get there to provide the support that was needed, as a result, direct consequence of the behaviour of the clampers, but also as a direct consequence of the inactivity and the unwillingness of this Council to actually enforce the powers that are available, to use the powers that are available to it, to enforce the appropriate legislation. This company does not have planning permission. They're acting unlawfully. They've imposed these penalties unlawfully. They've collected literally thousands of pounds from people unlawfully. And this Council has stood by and done precisely nothing. That, Mr Mayor, is utterly unacceptable. And Councillor Kerr, in my view, owes this Council, and more importantly, the people of the public of Derby, an explanation as to why she sat on her hands and done nothing. And now I call on her, even at this late stage, to actually take the enforcement action that is needed to stop this company from carrying on what I consider to be an illicit business practice in this city. And I therefore hope, Mr Mayor, that unlike the last motion, that we will at least get cross-party support for this, to actually take some action, to give some protection to the people of this city. And as I said in the last motion, Mr Mayor, to stand up for the people of Derby. Show us the colour of your money, stand up for the people of Derby and support this motion tonight.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Let me make it quite clear from the start. We have every sympathy for the motorist and for the people that are abused by these cowboy clampers. And that's what it boils down to, cowboy clampers. But unfortunately, it's just another example of the local Labour group bringing an issue to Council that the National Labour government have failed completely to deal with. 13 years, nearly 13 years, the Labour government have had to deal with this. And today, in the Queen's speech, in full knowledge that they will not be able to get any legislation through, what do they do? What do they do? They introduce, in the Queen's speech, proposals to tackle the problem finally. Well, that's just a little bit too late. It's interesting to note that the RAC Foundation have recently concluded that actually clamping on private property could be in breach of that motorist's human rights. So this may actually even go as high as the Human Rights Court yet. Dealing with, quite clearly, new legislation is required. And quite clearly, the Labour government haven't done it and aren't going to do it. So a future Conservative government will introduce legislation to regulate the industry.
Councillor Hussain. Councillor Hussain.
Mr. Mayor, I'm actually pleased that we are having a very timely debate on this issue, and that we are shifting our always inward focus onto things which cause serious concern to members of our public outside. And I think this is a welcome debate. The law is always trying to catch up with rogues who proliferate our society. And it does take time sometimes for legislation to catch up. But part of our role as elected member is actually to be people's eyes and ears. And if we pick up concern and we debate them in this chamber and we do pass motions and alert other people as well as government that there is a need to introduce legislation to control some of the activities which go off. In that respect, I think this is a welcome move. Obviously, this has been exploited for quite some time. If somebody makes a mistake and they park in the wrong place, if they are penalised in a reasonable manner and the penalty that is imposed is just sufficient to cover the cost of clamping, or maybe they make a small amount of profit out of it to deter people from abusing some parking facility for wrong end. That is to an extent understandable. But when people see this as an opportunity to profit, and when I say profit, they're actually exploiting, charging something like 120, 130, 150 pounds. I mean, obviously, that's not just about cost recovery or deterrence. That is exploitation of somebody's mistake. And therefore, I would welcome a cross-party support on it, not only just on this initiative, but any concerns which are raising people's anxieties out there and where exploitation of members of the public is taking place. I think this is the chamber where it should be debated, and this is the chamber where solutions should be proposed.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hickson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, and whilst I share the distaste for deplorable clamping practices in the city, I think that we have to be cautious as far as this motion is concerned. And in his rush for a populist headline, Councillor Williamson and Councillor Banwaite have put down a motion before this council which, in my view, is both flawed and unamendable. And I looked at it carefully, and I like to think with some modesty that I'm a dab hand at amending motions and have been over these years, but even I couldn't find a way to amend this motion in a way that would make it acceptable as far as this council is concerned. I think there are 2 points that bother me about this motion particularly. The first is that it's asking council officers to do something which is ultra vires, and for those of you who didn't do Latin at school, that means beyond its powers. And I think that that is an unwise precedent for this council to set. It's asking our officers to do something which they can't do and which they can't deliver. And the second point, and I would ask members to consider this very carefully, is the naming of an individual in paragraph 3 of this motion. Now, I'm sure Mr Foote will give the council advice if it wants it, but as I understand it, we only have qualified privilege in this chamber and not universal privilege as enjoyed by members of Parliament. And that means that if we make allegations which are not true, or we make aspersions against individuals which are not true, then those individuals can come at members either corporately or severally, individually, if they thought that they were being maligned in an untruthful and unfair way. Now, I don't know whether or not the allegations that are inherent in this motion are true or not. I don't know enough about it. But I would ask members to be particularly cautious about passing a motion that names an individual. Councillor Jennings is right. This matter can only be resolved by appropriate national legislation. And in the Crime and Security Bill that was read out in the Queen's speech this morning, it does contain measures to deal with this issue. whether or not in the dying days of the Labour government this will ever come to pass, I think is highly unlikely. But the Conservative Party have said quite specifically that they will deal with this matter with primary legislation in due course, and I'm confident that when a Conservative government is elected in March or May or whenever it happens, that this will be fairly high up on their order of priorities as far as legislation is concerned. But I don't think that we can support this motion because it's flawed, because it's asking the Council to do something which is ultra vires, and because of the fear, I think, of us going outside the bounds of qualified privilege as far as this motion is concerned. And for all of those reasons, my advice to my colleagues certainly has been that we should not vote in favour of this motion. That's not to say that we don't have any sympathy with people who've come unstuck as far as clamping is concerned, but because I think that we must reserve our legal position as members, and we also must protect the legal position of officers by not asking them to do something which is beyond their powers and which they can't do. And we shouldn't be putting our names to something which names an individual, which may lead us on to legal complications later. So I think that, unfortunate though it is, in the rush, as I said, for a headline, Councillor Williamson has put down a motion that can't be accepted. It's fundamentally flawed. It can't be amended. And my advice to members is to vote against it. And I think, to be on the safe side, to have their votes against it recorded.
Would you like to make any comments on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too was concerned at the naming of an individual in a notice of motion for the reasons that Councillor Hickson has articulated. However, my officers have checked out the accuracy of the comments in the third paragraph, and I am informed that they are factually correct. On that basis, then, there is no way in which an individual could bring an action for defamation because the comments made are true and justifiable.
Not on a point of personal explanation then, Mr Mayor, because I'm sure Mr Foot will, and it will be pertinent for him to advise us appropriately, whether or not that is the case, that would not preclude the individual in this case, rightly or wrongly, mounting an action, a legal action against either an individual or a group of members in this council, which would have to be tested in court.
All I can say that it is a defence to any action for defamation if the comments made are justified and true. And it was because of checking the veracity of the comments that I didn't seek to amend the notice of motion.
Okay, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think probably everybody here will have heard some of the fairly robust exchanges that have gone on Radio Derby, if nowhere else, about car parking and the sort of behaviours that have been happening and reported. And a lot of people have felt uncomfortable about it. Others have said, well, why can't people park between their white lines? And it's clearly not something which everybody agrees on. However, it is something which affects people from Derby, not just in Derby, but in other places, because this isn't just a Derby problem. There are other privately run car parks in other places with these similar sorts of clamping operations going on. And for that reason, I don't think that it's appropriate for us to only think about people in Derby. I think we actually think about when our Derby residents go to other areas as well. I hadn't heard that this was something which was included in the Queen's speech, at least in part, and I actually welcome that. And I think that it's something that we can amend, and I hope we can amend it in a way that more people, more members will be able to support. The challenge is to actually provide an opportunity to control where no power currently exists. And I think in Councillor Williamson's introduction, when he was talking about using loopholes in the law to have this situation, and to say that if we could have a protocol for all private car park operators, he actually puts his finger on the nub of the matter, that we can't do it at the moment, we don't believe we can do it, and therefore we actually need to seek changes. And I think we can seek changes. There have been a cursory look, as Mr Foot has intimated, on the legal situation that exists already. And And we can look further into that. We can ask our legal officers to look further into that. But I think we can also encourage the government to take this forward in a way that will be helpful to all local councils, and I've therefore got an amendment.
The amendment consists of the deletion of all the words following the final bullet point, which I take means from draw up down to in the city, and their replacement with the following words: ask the government to provide local councils with more powers to control the operation of privately run public car parks in their area.
Is that seconded?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. It consists of the deletion of the final paragraph. So it's the final bullet point from the words beginning draw up all the way down to the final word city, and the insertion of the following words: ask the government to provide local councils with more power to control the operation of privately run public car parks in their area.
Sorry, Councillor Cairn.
Mr. Mayor, as clarification, I'd also added in the deletion of the third paragraph, the one that refers to a particular individual, with the hope that that might make some members feel more content with the wording. Can you just confirm that?
Yes, that is there. That's why it came after the final bullet point, so I wasn't sure, but that's clarified. So the amendment is the deletion of the third paragraph and the words after the final bullet point.
Request has gone in for a 2-minute adjournment. Would anybody want that? Comfort break as well to go through it?
Take a vote on it.
All those in favour of taking the 2 minutes out to go through it? That's carried, so we'll take a 2-minute adjournment. If we're back here for 8:15, we'll give us a couple more minutes. Okay, we all ready? No? No. We can start now. Councillor Roberts is ready, so can I start now? Yeah, cheers. Hey? Yeah, Michael thought I'd say a few words.
In an attempt to speed things along, Councillor Kerr does wish to amend her amendment, which she can do with the consent of Council, and that would be to delete the first paragraph and to replace it with the following words. Council is alarmed by complaints from residents about the tactics employed by some private car park operators in the city. So that would be the first paragraph, and the other amendments in the original amendment still stand. Councillor.
Does Council accept that? Yeah, all those in favour? I think that's carried.
No, that the amendment.
Yeah, that's to replace the amendment that Councillor Kerr put in.
So that's open for debate.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that now. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think that probably we don't need to prolong this very much longer. And I'm very pleased that we're able to take this forward. I think this is a much more this would be a much more definite and successful route forward than talking about the situation regarding planning. And I will happily talk on another occasion to Councillor Williamson, who is wanting some answers on that, rather than to keep us all here for any longer tonight.
Councillor Williamson.
Mr Mayor, the Labour Group certainly can't accept this mealy-mouthed and pathetic amendment to the original motion. It seems clear from the Tory contribution this evening that they are very much the friend of the clampers in this city. Councillor Hickson there, weaving and turning and wriggling in every which way he possibly can in order to get out of supporting a motion that again stands up for people of Derby, stands up for the people who are being intimidated, who are being exploited, and you want to stand by wringing your hands like some latter-day Uriah Heep saying, well, it's no to do with us, Gov. You should be ashamed of yourself trying to use some legal mechanism in order to get out of actually providing some protection for the people of this city and actually get the council off the hook of doing its job of standing up for the people of this city. And it's all very well Councillor Jennings standing up and saying, well, it's all the fault of the nasty Labour government and they put forward the proposals at the 11th hour in the Queen's speech, knowing full well they're not going to get onto the statute book. But why won't they get onto the statute book, Councillor Jennings? Because your Tory friends and colleagues in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords have said they're going to filibuster and scupper Labour's Queen's speech, which includes dealing with problems associated with clamping. And I frankly, given the Tory record of 18 years, don't trust David Cameron to come riding to the rescue when his priority for government, when he gets back into government, his very first priority is to legalise fox hunting again. That's his sense of priorities.
Councillor Williamson, can we stick to the original amendment and not start to go off on a political tangent, please? Sorry, I beg your pardon. No, no, I didn't. So, have you finished, Councillor Williamson? Or?
Mr Mayor, I was
carry on.
In due deference to you, and with respect to you, Mr Mayor, I was dealing with a point that Councillor Jennings has made, and it's very clear. He said, and he attacked the Labour government, Mr Mayor, so I think it's quite reasonable for me to actually respond to the points that you allowed Councillor Jennings to make. He said, words to the effect, that the Labour government should have done something sooner, and they've now actually put this in at the 11th hour, knowing full well they can't get it onto the statute book. Now, it's also a matter of record that Tory peers, Tory parliamentarians have said they will scupper Labour's Queen's speech. That means his friends, his colleagues in Parliament will do all they can to scupper the legislation on this particular issue. But that's not the main point, though, Mr Mayor, because it's all very well wriggling in the way in which Councillor Hickson has done to try to get off this hook by saying, well, we don't have the legal, and indeed Councillor Kerr is the same, we don't have the legal powers to introduce a protocol, and Councillor Hickson went further in relation to the antisocial behaviour. I mean, it's true to say there are no explicit powers available to us to actually enforce a protocol. That surely, though, doesn't stop us, picking up the cudgels, talking to the operators of these private car parking companies and seeking some sort of voluntary agreement ahead of any legislation that subsequently might come forward. And of course we would support additional powers being made available to the Council so that we could statutorily enforce that. But in the absence of that, we don't just sit on our hands, surely. Surely we should be innovative. We should be community leaders. We should, and if I can use the phrase again, stand up for the people of Derby who are being exploited by a fly-by-night private company. And let me just also deal with a comment that's been made by Councillor Hickson. He somehow burned some sort of torch for Matthew Rutherford, worried that in some way, by naming and shaming this quite disgraceful and disreputable businessman, that somehow that should not be done, and that he didn't want to be party to that. And I think perhaps Councillor Hickson or maybe Councillor Jennings ought to just confirm whether or not Mr Rutherford is a contributor to the Conservative Party, because I can't say any...
Councillor Williamson, I think you're out of order with that, I'm sorry. So you have to retract that statement.
Well, I'm not withdrawing it, Mr Mayor, no, because I'm seeking an assurance that he's not a contributor to the Conservative Party, because the only reason...
Sorry, time's up, Councillor. Councillor Repton.
No, I'm sorry, Mr Mayor, with respect, I hadn't finished... Well,
Councillor Williamson, time is up, I'm sorry. Councillor
Repton. Tell me
Repton.
under what standing order, Mr Mayor, that you are ruling me out of order in responding to the debate. I'd like you to refer to the specific standing order that enables you, Mr Mayor, to stop me summing up...
You're actually out of time, so that's it.
Mayor, with respect, there is no time limit on summing up.
Councillor Repton. Councillor Repton.
Mr Mayor, this issue, as far as I'm concerned, and the whole of my group are concerned, is very simple and very straightforward. And I can't believe what we've heard this evening. I think when the public of Derby are out there, when they know when the chips are down, when they have problems, who they can't rely upon, they can't rely upon the two parties opposite, the Conservatives and the Liberals. They'll squirm and they'll riddle and they'll find reasons why they will not support people when they're being ripped off by penalties that are unacceptably punitive in the manner that's been described this evening. It's quite straightforward. This council can take action. We're proposing action and we're actually amazed, absolutely amazed that you people, meant to be representing people in the city, can't support it. The Liberals try and water it down so it's almost meaningless and no action's taken. It's very straightforward. This council can take action. It must take action. We will not agree to this watering down by this amendment, and the people of Derby can judge your two groups about your lack of interest, your lack of concern and your lack of action. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Banway.
Wow. Well, I think it's a good opportunity to take the heat out of it and calm down and look at the facts. I mean, I've been involved on this issue really soon after the story broke, and organised the initial demonstration at the car park, which the Labour group then got fully behind. One of the actions that we then took was to look across the country at other local authorities grappling with a similar situation. We didn't have to look very hard and then come across a similar situation facing Windsor and Maidenhead, which, and if I can make it quite clear, is a very conservative local authority. They've got a similar situation of a car park near Windsor Castle that has been clamping and charging up to £500, and that's been actually decimating their tourist trade. You know, rich American tourists coming down with a budget, being clamped, up to £500, you know, absolutely causing mayhem to the local tourist trade. Now, I don't know if anyone's bothered to do their research on this, and we see a lot of political posturing here, a lot of rhetoric, and the Conservative and the current leadership are very good at that now, and the Liberals, well, they're just sheer incompetent. Now, if they'd done their research, they would have realised that there is local action that can be taken on this. At the last full council of Windsor and Maidenhead, I don't know if anybody's aware, they actually passed a similar motion, unanimously, across party, full cross-party support on it. Now, I actually spoke to the highways officer that's now actually been passed to. And he's actually made it quite clear that in the course of preparing that motion, they did seek council advice. And that council advice made it quite clear to them that local action could be taken. So that motion was debated, it was passed. It is now before the legal team at Windsor and Maidenhead to be implemented. So again, we've got elected members here. And it appalls me, it absolutely disgusts me that, that we have to share this same chamber. You actually bring this council into total disrepute. You come here, stand up, make speeches that actually mean nothing. Sheer rhetoric. That's not leadership. And let me make another point clear. Where were you when we took on the clampers? Were you scared, Harvey? Were you scared, Matthew? Were you scared, Lucy? Hillary? Where were you? And let me make another thing quite clear. At the last full council, the Conservatives put a motion that they worked on to become the official opposition. What have they done since then? They've been totally out at sea on every campaigning issue that this Labour group has led on. And another point, I'll make it quite clear to this chamber. Yes, people have, there's this joke, and I like it now, Councillor Banwaite gets on the bandwagon. I'd rather be on that bandwagon, be out at sea. Just before this council chamber, one of the Conservative councillors came up to me, in envy almost, of watching Councillor Williamson perform in front of ITV to explain exactly what we were doing to represent the people of Derby on this important issue, mocking and making a comment about getting on the bandwagon. And I said, well, what's your strategy? And he says, we're very subtle, Well, subtle and secretive and non-existent. What is your great master plan? Clearly, it's to do absolutely nothing. It's to come to this chamber every 2 months and make party political points that actually mean nothing to the man on this street. And I'm glad we've got residents up there from across Derby, from Littleover, from Chellaston, from Liberal and Conservative areas that can see the elected members in action, which is absolutely, completely no action. The reality is our role as elected members, as public servants, is to represent the people we represent. That's what we're elected for. And if they come to us with an issue, we are duty-bound to take on their concerns. And it's absolutely quite clear that there's only one group standing up for the people of this city, and it's us. And it's quite clear that the only proposals that the Liberals and the Conservatives of the city can come up with is absolutely no reaction. So, Mr. Mayor, I was hoping not to lose my temper there, but clearly... Clearly I have. I've calmed down. But look, I do get upset. I get upset because this is my city. I was born and bred here, for God's sake. Well, I was going to replace that. I was going to replace that for being the postman.
I've not heard that one for a while.
I haven't. It's the postman's son now. That's my favourite one. But look, let's be realistic. For God's sake, let's be common sense about it. This is a cross-party issue. This is a no-brainer. Don't make heavy weather of this. This amendment sucks. Let's not accept it. Labour Group have put together a perfectly quality motion here. Let's support it. Thank you.
Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was the Williamson Banwaite show. And the leading Labour councillor said that to me a few days ago. I just wonder, Mr. Mayor, about this motion, because if all the people that use that car park between white lines, and return to collect their cars at the correct time, I don't think this motion would be here tonight. I know when I park my car, and I know it's a very small one, I do ensure it's parked between white lines, and I do adhere to the time factor of when I should return to the car park. I'm rather surprised that the meter they had, they weren't advising the people concerned to use the city council car parks, because surely that is what we should be doing, and not using private car parks. Well, I do sympathise with the private car park people because it is their business. There is one thing I don't agree with, though, and that's the charge of £125. I think that's extortionate. But again, I'm pleased to hear in the Queen's speech that the Labour government have put it down for consideration. I share the comments made by Councillors Jennings and Hickson that perhaps they won't have time to do it because they may well not be in power or have enough time to get it through. I was disturbed also, Mr Mayor, about the use of this chamber to conduct a meeting regarding this. It gave the impression to constituents in Oakwood that the City Council were backing this, and that, in my opinion, was utterly wrong. And on top of that, by the projection on the television, saying Mr Williamson sitting in the chair that you're sitting in, also gave the impression to people that he was back in charge of the City Council. Wishful thinking, I might add. Quite honestly, I think this motion is not a good one. It's completely and utterly wrong, and it's down to the government to make changes and bring in a universal charge for clamping. And all I say to the people of Derby, who are most law-abiding, not the 30-odd that have misused this car park, if they park between white lines and come back on time, they won't have a problem. I visited...
Can we have a bit of order? Thank you. Order. Thank you.
I visited this car park.
Order, please. Thank you. Carry on.
I visited this car park, spoke to many people who told me that as far as they were concerned, it's the best car park in Derby, it's the cheapest, they have no problems, they park between the lines and they come back on time. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just refer back to the first words I said when we started the debate on the original motion was that we do actually support the motorists and the people that are being harassed and actually very poorly treated by cowboy clampers. Councillor Williamson, in his contribution just, raised the point himself, stated that we have no power to deal with this issue as a council. We do not have the authority to deal with this. It is a national government issue. We stand here accused tonight of doing nothing, when we're actually saying that we want to write to the government as a council and tell them that we are not happy with the situation and tell them that we want the legislation in now to deal with this problem and protect the motorists and the people of Derby and the people nationwide who suffer from this blight. Councillor Banwaite says, where was I? Well, I was probably reading your political posturing at the time, because that's all the Labour group are doing on this issue, is pure political posturing, raising an issue that they know cannot be dealt with at this level, and fooling the people of Derby into believing that they are doing something about it. You are doing nothing. The amendment to this motion deals with the issue by sending it to government and asking them to deal with the issue, to give councils the power they need to deal with these clampers. To stand there and say you are doing something for the people of Derby with your original motion is utter nonsense. The amendment, as it stands at the moment, deals with the issue, raises the issue with Parliament, and hopefully they will take notice and something will come of it. But it won't be from a Labour government because they won't be there long enough.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The motion as amended starts with Council is alarmed and goes on to expand on that. The next paragraph starts, these complaints have led Council to conclude, and goes on to explain that. It then goes on to say, Council therefore requests the Cabinet to instruct its highways and legal officers to examine what legal remedies there are. Now, it might come as a shock to colleagues to my right, but we've already asked legal officers to examine the situation about ASBOs. And you've got a choice here. You can either go with what Councillor Banwaite says happened in Maidenhead, or you can have the report of our legal officer of a conversation with their legal officer who took barrister's advice, which was cautious on the ASBO situation. Now you've got a straight choice. You can be cautious, or you can be dynamic and off the track with colleagues over there. But I would favour being cautious, so the council acts properly on legal advice from its officers. And I think the rhetoric over there is really, we've put up a better amendment than the original motion. And I think we should accept the amendment, and I'd like to put that motion now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll take one more speaker, and it's Councillor Dinser, and then we'll move it to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, that I think sums it up. Councillor Allen is saying caution. Yes. Caution is about, oh, we don't want to do anything, nothing to stand up for people, nothing to actually respond to what has been happening for a number of weeks now. And Councillor Williamson and Councillor Banwaite have led on the issue of responding to the, not caution, but some of the traumatic experiences of people living in Derby and beyond. And caution, evasiveness, I mean, Councillor Hickson, he talks about being very experienced in sort of looking at motions and technical natures. He also was being cautious. He was being cautious about not recognising what everybody has actually reported, not just in the papers, not just in the public arena, not just by the TV, that this particular company and a particular person have been at the centre of all the activities which have raised the greatest concerns. Now, there may be others who actually infringe the rules, but there's so much evidence that has been quite clearly accounted for by Councillor Williamson tonight and previously, which says there are particular individuals and companies who are doing more to actually damage the experience of people who, some illegally, but others possibly not illegally, parked in this particular car park. So you can't be cautious, you can't be mealy-mouthed, you can't be evasive, you can't be avoiding the fact that this has come about from a particular organisation and a particular individual who has been fairly prominent, and I understand has admitted that he may not have the power, the planning application legal requirements. And all Councillor Hickson wants to do with his sage-like experience of tinkering with motions here and changing a word here and sort of putting another word here to say, oh, this is better, this is technically better. Rubbish, Councillor Hickson, rubbish. Yeah. Councillor Jennings, he stood up in the first debate saying, I oppose this motion, I oppose this action because it's not required. The Labour government have put a Queen's speech and they will do it. But by the way, we're not going to support it. And when we get in power as a Conservative government, we'll bring it in. Very churlish, I would say. Very churlish. And cynical. That is, I think, posturing. I think that is caution is saying, I want to put my head in the sand and I don't want to deal with this issue because it's a little bit controversial, a little bit difficult, might be sort of putting taking a bit of a step out in terms of it may need a lot of tinkering and work by the officers to shape a protocol which could be signed up by all the organisations who run parking facilities in this in this city. These original motion issues are relevant even after 45 minutes of hearing, tinkering, evasion, caution. They still stand, and actually removing paragraph 1 by removing the main focus of the whole issue, removing the named person when legal advice has shown us that there is nothing to actually fear, Liberal Democrat group, in terms of having that in there, and then removing the one thing that this council can do by working towards having a protocol, voluntarily working with the different parking organisations to come up with a protocol which they can be signed up to and enable them to do their job better and not have the negative experience for the individuals who use those parking spaces. Removing that, the heart of the motion, the heart of the intent and the sympathies being reflected of those residents who have quite graphically shared with Councillor Williamson and Councillor Banwade the issues and the trauma they've experienced. That is being ripped out of this motion. What for? For caution, evasion, and actually tinkering with technicalities of a motion. I don't think it deserves to be changed, and the reasons given so far by the two opposition parties simply do not stack up. They don't focus on the issues. They don't stand up for the people of Derby. They don't stand up for the issues and the concerns of people living out there. They only think about what's happening in here, in this chamber, and technicalities. I think for that reason, the amendment to the original motion should be stopped, and the original, and we should go back to the original motion and support that. I would urge everybody to reconsider their amendments and their discussions and come back to the original motion, because that is hard.
Sorry, time's up, Councillor, to be fair. OK, I'm going to move it. I think we've had pretty much cross-party debate on that, so I'm going to move it to the vote of the amendment.
I'd like to, if it's possible on an amendment, to move a recorded vote, because I think this is really the substance of the debate, and I therefore call for that, and I call my colleagues to stand. OK, we'll record a vote.
Will members of the Council please indicate whether they are for or against the amendment, or whether they are abstaining as I call out their names. Councillor Allen. Councillor Banwaite. Councillor Baxter. Councillor Bayliss. Councillor Berry. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Kerr. Councillor Carr. Councillor Shearer. Councillor Dinser. Councillor Gins. Councillor Graves. Councillor Grimmadell. Councillor Harwood. Councillor Hickson. Councillor Higginbottom. Councillor Hurd. Councillor Holmes. Councillor Hussain. Councillor Ingle. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jennings. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keane. Councillor F. Khan. Councillor R. Khan. Councillor Latham. Councillor Leeming. Councillor Lowe. The Mayor, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Nater. Councillor Nath. Councillor Poulter. Councillor Rawson. Councillor Redfern. Councillor Repton. Councillor Richards. Councillor Roberts. Councillor Shanker. Councillor Skelton. Councillor Troop. Councillor Turner. Councillor Webb. Councillor Williams. Councillor Williamson. Councillor Willoughby. Where's that come from? Councillor Winter.
Cool, blimey, sir.
Councillor Winter. For Councillor Wood. And Councillor Davis. My apologies. Yeah.
For 33 against 15, Mr. Mayor.
So that's carried. The amendment's carried. So move to the Councillor Williamson does have the right to. Does anybody else wish to speak before Councillor Williamson sums up? No, Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And firstly, let me apologise. I got a bit ahead of myself. I was thinking I was summing up when I was actually responding to an amendment, and couldn't quite understand why you were calling me. But you'll accept the emotion of the occasion did get the better of me there. And the reason I feel emotional about this is because the reason I feel emotional about this and very strongly about this is that people really have been intimidated and subject to quite disgusting behaviour, it has to be said, Mr Mayor. It's clear that Mr Rutherford and the car clampers in Derby will be resting a little bit easier in their beds tonight following the support that they've received from the independent councillors, from the Tory councillors and from the Liberal Democrat councillors this evening. And I know people are shouting shame, but you know, they know no shame. They are shameless. That is the sad fact of the matter. And it's clear, Mr Mayor, the original motion that we put forward, whilst it's true there was no power directly to regulate, we could have entered into a voluntary protocol. There was, however, power to use antisocial behaviour legislation, and really the motion now has been completely neutered. I mean, it's not something that anybody would oppose now, of course. But as the Council has quite clearly let down the people of this city, the Labour Group will continue to work for the people of this city. We'll continue to work for the people who are being exploited and intimidated at this car park. We've already drawn up, and we ourselves have obtained Council's opinion, a legal opinion. We're helping all those people who have been unlawfully clamped, because, let's remember, the Council hasn't actually fulfilled its obligation to enforce the planning legislation. This company does not have planning permission, let's be clear about it, and therefore does not have power to levy any parking charges, let alone these huge and swinging penalties. And we will help those people, and are helping those people, to get their money back. It's just a pity that the Council doesn't seem to see fit to actually follow suit and to actually do what it is elected for. It's here to actually represent and assist the people of this city. And I can see you're bored, Councillor Latham, and I know you don't care about it. You probably would never have to use that car park, because you're probably unlikely to have to go and sign on in your big four-wheel drive vehicle. And I can see Councillor Khan down here similarly looking very bored about it. But frankly, you know, you shameless people really do disgust me, and I'm sure you disgust the people of this city. And it's a sad night, Mr Mayor, for Derby, a sad night for this council.
We have some order. Let Councillor Williamson finish. Sorry, carry on.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A sad night for this council chamber that we can't unite on this one issue when we've heard those horrendous testaments from local people about the intimidation and exploitation that they've been subject to. And yes, we'll support this amended motion, Mr Mayor, but it's a pretty meaningless motion, and we'll continue to do what we can to support the people of this city on this issue and on other issues as well, Mr Mayor.
Okay, I'm going to move to vote on the motion as amended. All those in favour of the motion as amended? Okay, that's carried. Motion 3, Councillor Roberts to move, Councillor Banwaite to second. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Perhaps we may well get through this motion with United on a particular issue. I must say that I'm having difficulty, because I was quite overwhelmed when Councillor Williamson said that Councillor Hickson reminded him of Uriah Heep. And as I recall, Uriah Heep was famed for his humility. I'm ever so humble, Uriah Heep, and if anyone doesn't fit that category of being I'm ever so humble, it must be Councillor Hickson. However, when one looks at the position with drop curves around our city, and looks occasionally, but more frequently, and see now what are they called? Chairs, motorised wheelchairs, motorised wheelchairs actually being driven on the carriageway by disabled people who are absolutely driven to riding on the carriageway because of either no access to the pavement, the footpath, or indeed very poor car parking, and I'm sorry to get back to car parking, but very poor car parking, which doesn't allow them access along the pavement. I do feel that in some way we're heading for a disaster with one of these wheelchair users. I see them even on Nottingham Road, which anyone who travels that way will know is one of the main corridors into the suburbs of our city. One of the reasons that we have particular difficulties with the manner in which the drop curbs are dealt with is because we've moved a considerable amount of money from the footpaths maintenance budgets and so on into trying to deal with the roads and the backlog. And I can tell Councillor Kerr where Councillor Holmes probably got his information from about the escalating costs of the backlog, because as the Chair of Audit and Accounts, I went along with Councillor Poulter's members of the Planning and Transportation Commission to talk to our highways officers and to Carillion. And I was amazed to find that what I thought was a £1 million backlog and then surprisingly became £1.3 million was suddenly being talked about, not, as Councillor Holmes has said, as 1.5 million, but an increase of 0.5 million, and we're talking about a possible 1.8 million. And I'm not at all surprised to find out that Councillor Kerr, in her response to Councillor Holmes, said, "You know more than I do." Well, need I say more? However, I also happened to talk to someone about concessionary fares and said, "Are you aware that Bob Laxton's intervention has got Derby £2.8 million extra for concessionary fares?" And the response I had was, "Yes, I do know." And I phoned up the Cabinet member with responsibility for planning and transportation and concessionary fares, and she said, "You know more than I do." And it seems to be a recurring theme when you talk to the Cabinet member for planning and transportation. You know more than I do. But Lucy Kerr does know, because she travels around Derby a lot on her bicycle, and she does see things at first hand in relation to difficulties that people have getting around our city, that there is an increase in people using motorised wheelchairs on the road. There is a difficulty being experienced by the lack of drop curbs in our city. And what my group and I want to achieve with this motion is to say to the controlling group, you really do have a duty of care, no pun intended of course, a duty of care to the people in this city, the mothers with small children, the people who ride in the invalid carriages, and that is a responsibility that we do have. Disabled people and parents of young children have rights and needs, and it is the Council's responsibility to fulfil those, and I have pleasure in moving this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody wish to speak? Sorry, Councillor Banwhite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got involved, yes, I second this motion. I got involved in this issue, which emanates from my ward. I received a letter in the summer from, and I'd like to pay tribute to my constituent, Mrs. Jean Wallace, a resident in her late 80s of Garth Crescent. She sent me a letter, and I've got it right here, eloquently making it quite clear her own experiences, her day-to-day experiences of trying to get to important local facilities like the shops, the post office, to a friend's house, to the bingo, to the local old people centre and the daily difficulties that she experiences. And she wrote me a very passionate and emotional letter asking for my help. Now, as a local councillor, we all go through this. You look at some casework and you get on the phone and you do go through this kind of methodological approach. You say, OK, I'll refer it to Mick Watts, I'll refer it to the highways, I'll refer it to the cabinet member. She said, well, that's all been done. We've done all that. And nothing is still being done. She said to me, I've been asking for a drop curb at one location because I regularly, daily, have to go through there and have daily problems. And she's one of those mobility scooter users that is forced onto the road. And she says, I've been through all that. We need action, and I need action now. So she said, I challenge you to come and ride a mobility scooter with me to experience what it's like. Now, I took up that challenge. I was happy to do that. What politician wouldn't? Now, I rode a mobility scooter with Jean, and we were joined by another lady, and we went to the local district centre, and I have to say I did enjoy it. The scooter was quite a fun thing to ride. We got to the local shops, we met a number of residents on the way, but the most important thing is, out of that, I got to experience firsthand the sort of problems residents were experiencing. For example, vehicles parked on the pavement, not leaving enough room for, let alone a mobility scooter, but a pram and a pushchair. And obviously, coming back to the drop curbs issue, the lack of drop curb provision certainly in Bolton Ward and Alveston Ward. Now, having rode a mobility scooter that day, then the next question, obviously, on everybody's mind was, what is Councillor Banwaite going to do now that he's been and had his picture in the paper? I'm sure that was on the minds of certainly the Liberals and the Tories that do bugger all. Now, certainly...
Mind your language there, Councillor.
Oh, sorry. I withdraw bugger all. So the next proposal was quite clear. We have delivered. The first thing we did was secure funding from our local board of £1,600 to deliver 2 drop curbs on Lansdowne Road, we're now waiting on a date for highways to get that work done. We have raised as one of our highways priorities for highways to deliver all the drop curbs on the waiting list for Bolton Ward that goes back several years, and hopefully the funding will be provided for that next year. So this is a backup for us. But clearly what we need now is action from this City Council to provide funding from wherever they can find it, and there are substantial reserves there, and clearly that's what politicians are employed to do, is to look at the figures and to work with highways officers. And I've got some figures here. At the moment, there are 200 drop curbs on the council's waiting list. There's £40,000 in this year's budget, meaning that leaves 150 drop curbs, which at a cost of £110,000, if we can find that, then we can get that delivered in this financial year. And let me make it quite clear what this means to mobility scooter users. I said to Jean, I said, look, Jean, we're going to get this done, we're going to get that done, it's going to take next year. She says, I might not have till next year. My quality of life is based upon a day-to-day. Their quality of life, they are, and sorry to steal the Churchillian phrase, in the evening of their life. They can't wait around for tax years and financial year ends. They need this support now. And we've got politicians in this chamber, and I think this should get cross-party support. So let's get our fingers out, and again, no pun intended to anybody. Let's get together on this, let's support this motion, let's send a clear message to this cabinet member who spends half her time clearly posturing for a seat in Parliament rather than getting out and supporting the residents of this city. Get her doing some work, sitting down with the leader of the council, putting funds. You can laugh. You can laugh. These are senior citizens in your ward, in our ward. Put your money where your mouth is and provide the funding.
Time's up, Councillor Banwaite. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Can I start this time with an amendment? And then speak to the amendment? I'm sorry.
The amendment consists of the deletion of words in the second paragraph after council therefore. So the first paragraph is as is, and then after council therefore in the second paragraph the following words are inserted. Encourages neighbourhood boards to consider using some of their funds to install dropped curbs where they think are a priority. Where they think they are a priority. Welcomes the progress being made by the Council's parking officers to use national regulations introduced earlier this year to enforce access to dropped curbs.
Is that seconded, that amendment? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And can I say that I was very pleased that Councillor Van Wade has already taken the initiative for the first part of that amendment, in that this was one, the need for more drop curbs was something that was identified earlier this year when the Council approved additional funds to all neighbourhood boards for highways issues. And it was certainly something that was very in the forefront of my thoughts when we put the items together that could be used for that purpose. Ever since I've been a councillor in Littleover, it's been something that I've been aware of. And over the years, I have passed on to the council, initially the county council, more recently the city council, places where dropped crossings were needed. And therefore, over the years, and it has taken a long time, a fair number of those that have been needed in Littleover have been provided. We're not there yet. There are still places which I think, why have we not got one here yet? But it certainly does improve, and it is a drip, drip, drip effect. Now, I'm disappointed that this hasn't been something that has clearly been done with the same degree of zest across the whole of the city. Or maybe I should be pleased it's not being done with that, because my residents in Littleover have been able to benefit more quickly. But if it had been a requirement, if it had been something that more people were chasing for, I'm sure that more money would have gone into this to meet this need sooner. We now have that money that, oh dear, we now have that money that has been put into the neighbourhood boards' budgets, so that if it is a priority, then that money is available. In terms of the second part of the amendment, and regarding the new regulations, this is something that was drawn to my attention by a resident from outside the city who comes into the city. And she is somebody who is very aware of the importance of lowered curbs for access across roads. And she was said to me, the County Council is going to be doing something about sorting this out. They've made it a priority. Can you work with them, please, to take this forward? I asked the highways officers back in the late summer if they could look into this, and with a bit of prodding, they came back to me and said, well, actually, the county has talked about it, but they don't seem to be doing very much. And I said, well, can we go it alone? There is usually some encouragement for councils to move together so that there is a bigger public information message, a public education message, to be able to take forward over a larger area. Because people coming into the city to park from the county area may not be as aware if their local area is not highlighting an issue of this sort. So I would have liked to have been able to go forward and make this a county-wide campaign and something that could be happening on a wider basis. But if the county isn't moving forward as strongly, and maybe the Conservatives with their contacts with the county might give them a nudge on a friendly basis, we can go it alone. And that is what we're currently looking at doing, and it's something that I hope we can implement sooner rather than later. The other issue there, which is one which is a problem for most areas, is the issue of pavement parking. And I expect that most neighbourhood boards, like my own, have had exchanges and explanations from the police about when it can be enforced and when obstruction is not really occurring. And I personally find it a really frustrating situation. But again, it is something that will require, I think, some stronger national legislation or maybe implementation of things that we can't yet do in Derby. But at the moment, we seem to be dependent on the police to be able to deal with that. And therefore, I haven't sought to put in a particular action at this point on this motion. I hope that makes clear the action that we can take and that we can take it forward in those two parts. Firstly, with encouraging the neighbourhood boards to prioritise if they see fit, and secondly, regarding the education of people about the importance and moving towards enforcement action to protect the drop curbs.
Councillor Bayliss. It's on the amendment. I've got you on
fine.
this.
I don't want to interrupt the Chief Executive's office getting fitted out, but I'll try my best, Mr Mayor. In terms of the amendment, surprisingly enough, we wouldn't accept it and would throw it out. Again, Councillor Kerr shuffles around. It's interesting now she didn't know about the access to drop curbs in terms of legislation change. She was told by somebody else outside the council. Well, there's no surprise there. I too have been contacted by residents regarding drop curbs, first in Ulverston district centre, which happened before Councillor Banwaite went out on his mobility scooter trip, and secondly in Allington, which was after
somebody's just gone to stop and pull the plug out, I think. So, if you just bear with it a sec. Sorry, carry on.
Secondly, in relation to Allington, Mr Blatherwick had contacted me. He had issues with drop curbs. He wasn't quite as generous as Councillor Banwaite's in situation. He used his scooter and I had to sort of jog alongside. But the point he made was regarding drop curbs was about sometimes there was no smooth transition from one level to another, issues about overgrown pavements, and also, particularly at the weekend because it was Saturday morning, about where there was ponding and puddling on both roads and pavements, which made it impossible for him to drive his scooter through. I think it's also interesting that we're okay at spending £250,000 on a World Cup bid, but we don't want to spend £110,000 on something for our elders, and I think that's appalling. And I think that what we've got to do is find this money and find it quickly. I also get a bit concerned, well, very concerned, about the issue where people come along to the neighbourhood boards and say, can you give us some money for something that should be funded centrally? I mean, Ulverston has funded, I think it's 2 drop curbs out of the budget this year, which is fine. But I do get concerned when people think, oh, well, we'll just come along and do this and it'll help us out of a central budget issue. I think that's wrong, actually. This is something that should be tackled centrally and something that we should be making sure gets done, and we need to make sure the backlog is cleared. One thing I would also say in relation to this is that what the council needs to take into account the issue of the different styles of shoppers that you can get, and mobility scooters. It's something that the point that Mr Blatherwick made to is that the one that Councillor Banwaite was lent had very large wheels, and it was fine for it to go up and down curbs and round certain things, but obviously the one he usually uses got much smaller wheels. It wasn't an issue until he showed me exactly what that meant to him, and I think that's something we ought to take into consideration. But in terms of the amendment, Mr Mayor, there's no reason for us to support it. Thank you.
Councillor Higginbottom.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to ask Councillor Kerr if she'd omitted to put into her amendment a further delegated budget to the neighbourhood boards in order to pay for what you're asking them to pay for. As you will well know, most neighbourhood boards have already set their priorities, having spent the £10,000. What you're asking for, you know neighbourhood boards can't do.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My group and I would like to support this amendment. Each one of us as ward councillors has the means within our neighbourhood budgets to prioritise, promote and provide extra services on top of the excellent services already provided by Mick Watts and his team. I believe there are a more strategic and a more neighbourhoods-focused way of ensuring that these additional services are provided correctly and, more importantly, appropriately. We have done this in Spondon, and I would like to spend the next 1.5 minutes telling you and sharing good practice with you. In 2005, Councillor Berry actually went out with a disabled user and without the help of the DET, I might add, had a look around our ward at all the drop curbs that were there and actually looked at where they should be strategically located, identified them, and actually had several of them put in. In 2007-8, our neighbourhood board realised there could be issues within the ward that disabled people might not have had addressed. And so we set up a disability subgroup. This disability subgroup's first action was actually to write to every single household within the ward, asking them that if they were disabled, what were their needs and requirements and wishes for services, not only in Spondon but also in the city. As a result of this, they applied to the board for substantial funding to put in some further drop curbs that they decided were also strategically needed. And then in 2009, this Conservative group made sure that every single ward had a further £10,000 that they could address such issues with locally. In Spondon, we held a forum meeting, we talked to our residents, they told us what they wanted. We then had a special board meeting to have a look at the work programme and to see what we wanted. On that, we identified there were another couple of drop curbs that we'd like to put in, but we also identified that there needed to be, alongside this, an education programme working with schools, local residents, young drivers, etc., about speeding, parking, dustbins, inconsiderate parking, etc. We also work quite closely with our police neighbourhood teams and work closely with our traffic enforcement officers to make sure that when problems occur within the village, they are dealt with swiftly and accurately. So, as you can see, there are several things that you could be doing as councillors with your neighbourhood board and working within existing budgets and teams. Working in this manner will ensure that the local residents get a true say in the delivery and development of the service, and what we have done in Spondon is an excellent example of neighbourhood working. So, for those reasons, we will support this amendment. And if any of you feel that you need any further help with your neighbourhood working and your neighbourhood boards, please come and see us from Spondon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got 3 more speakers and then that's it. So put it to the vote. I've got Councillor Redfern, Nathan, Baxter. Sorry. Yes, after that. This is on the amendment. Councillor Redfern.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have used our money to install drop curbs in Derwent. But there is an issue that is not being identified. Drop curbs are not only for wheelchair users. They are tactile pieces of pavement for people with sight impairment or the loss of sight to feel where it is safe for them to cross the road. Councillor Banway had an opportunity to use a mobility scooter. Unfortunately, I was in a position last year where I didn't have a choice. Through illness, I had to use a wheelchair. And it's very, very frightening for someone who's used to walking and getting where they want to get by their own means to be in a situation where they have to be lowered backwards down a pavement because you're frightened in case you're going to drop and you'll drop on the road. It's awful. Also, I think that you have to consider that whilst there are priorities and there are demands on the budget, and I think it's a very difficult situation that you have to make those decisions. However, when you are considering making those priorities and those decisions, please consider people where there aren't any drop curbs and they can't access the shops. They can't get down a pavement. They can't move out of their road and they have to have council support at an additional cost and their independence undermined because there isn't a drop curb. I would also remind members that we do consult with disabled groups and we ask them what they want. Now, if we're consulting with disabled groups, and we have a gentleman at the front here who I'm sure has great difficulty at times, then maybe we should use some of his expertise. If we're consulting with disabled groups, then I would suggest that the time we take to use a consultant's time, then we should consider what they are saying and perhaps act on it. Thank you.
Hey, Councillor Redfern. We've got Councillor Nath, Councillor Baxter, then I'm going to let you somewhat and then move it to a vote after that.
Thank
Councillor
you,
Nath.
Mr. Mayor. The importance of dropped curbs cannot be underestimated. We all realise that how important they are to the disabled, to mums with pushchairs, and, as Councillor Redfern said, people who are short-sighted or who have some sighting defects, or even for children. Councillor Van Bath earlier on has been really telling the council how much involved he is with his constituents. I give you an example. On a Saturday morning, I had a call from one of my constituents who is elderly, uses scooterized scooter, and she crosses 2 streets to go to the church on a Sunday morning. She asked me if I could come along and see how she negotiates that. And I went on a Sunday morning about 8 o'clock, and I accompanied her on scooter, not actually on her scooter, but walked with her. And do you know, every single curb was dropped. Every single curb has a drop there. And I said, well, we got the dropped curbs, then what is the issue? She said, hold on, councillor, let's go to the next street. And when we moved to the next street, lo and behold, on the dropped curb itself, there was a vehicle parked. She said, this is the issue. You tell me, how am I going to go across from here to go to my church? And that was an issue. And I just went to the highway department. I asked them, yes, this is a particular issue. But they did. They said, we got one solution to that. We will put just a straight line across that drop curb, which is really an indication to the motorist that you should not park on there because of the dropped curb. And lo and behold, another thing happens. One of the drivers at one of the neighborhood forums in our ward asked the question, why is this white line in front of that dropped curb? And I had to stand up and explain to him why it has been put. So why I'm giving this example, Mr. Mayor, is that the question is of enforcement. How do you enforce that? The line is there. If you are a considerate driver, you would pay respect to that. You would not park on there. But those who still carry on parking on that, causing difficulty to one of my constituents to go even on a Sunday morning to the church, what do we do about that? This is something which need to enforce and see what exactly can be done so that people even have the use of the dropped curbs wherever they are. We can drop curbs as many as we like. Until we get that enforcement in place, people would still be facing the same difficulty as my constituent has been facing, Councillor Banwat's constituents have been facing, and I think every ward councillor, all 17 wards, constituents would be facing. So I think the amendment contains that bit that we should be looking at enforcement. That's why I support this amendment.
Okay, Councillor Baxter.
Yes, when we're looking at a budget of £10,000 a year for neighbourhood boards, I think this is totally inadequate. And I agree with my colleague, Councillor Higginbottom, because clearly on Mackworth Ward, we have a... Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to plonk my bomb because my legs are still hurt. Thank you very much.
Sit down, Councillor.
Thank
Okay.
you.
It's okay.
At Mackworth, since about 2004, we've had a place called Balham Walk, which is only a short distance, which the highway people don't think is important to resurface the footway. And then what happens? A lady falls down and breaks her leg, so we get a request to the neighbourhood board to resurface Balham Walk. The 10,000 quid has gone. So how are we in Mackworth going to pay a penny towards getting any more money for dropped curbs? Clearly, provided Councillor Kerr adds another roughly £7,000 or £8,000 to each ward, and every ward doesn't want that number of curbs, you would solve the problem. Instead of giving us 10,000, if you'd give us 18,000, as far as I'm concerned, and if every ward has an equal number of drop curbs to provide, that would solve the problem. At the moment, I disagree with her amendment, because clearly to ask neighbourhood boards to put money in for these drop curbs, some wards have already spent the money, because the highways officers have been to Mackworth Ward, and they're more than happy that we are paying some neighbourhood board money out to resurface footways and carriageways.
Okay, Councillor Carr, can you sort? Do you want to use the next one over?
Is that working?
There you go.
Yeah, okay. I'd just like to pick up a few points. I'll be very quick. A couple of years back, members will remember, I fell off a mountain and broke my ankle, and I was pushed around in a wheelchair for a time. I have to say the most scariest thing was being taken shopping when I didn't have control of the wheelchair, but that's a separate issue. I completely agree with Councillor Naff. Enforcement is an issue. I noticed that Councillor Banwick talked about the fact that the pavement was blocked. Well, the police have got some very clear views on that. Most of the time, it's a judgment issue. But if you can't even get a pram through, they will regard that as obstruction and they will prosecute. Similarly, if you are parked across a drop curb. So, again, I support this amendment because it will increase the amount of enforcement. The other issue that was talked about is backlog. That's a bit of a red herring. I've talked to Mick Watts. The backlog's always the same, because some of them have been on there that long, they've got done, or the road's gone, or whatever. There's always a backlog of about 200. And my final point is that over 18 months ago, when the previous administration was in power, Mick Watts told them that it was about 15 years of the amount of money they were putting into the budget. If they put more money in then, we wouldn't be having this debate now. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm going to move it to the vote on the amendment. All those in favour? Sorry.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I believe I have the right to reply to the amendment.
No, not on the amendment. On the original motion, you can do. Not on the amendment. So, all those in favour of the amendment? Those against? Okay, the amendment is carried. Okay, back to the original motion as amended. Anybody wish to speak on that before Councillor Robertson, Councillor Banwait? Sorry, you've already spoken on it apparently, so you can't speak on it anymore. So, anybody else wish to speak? Go ahead,
Point of order. No one yet has spoken on the motion as amended. You can get me on one, you won't get me on that one.
Apparently you've already spoken on the substantive motion. So.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. The substantive motion is no longer the substantive motion because it's been amended to create a new substantive motion. He couldn't have spoken on it.
Do you want to sum up, Councillor Roberts?
There seems, Mr. Mayor, very little point in making a speech when two-thirds of the Council are already convinced. However, I do regret that the other minority party in our chamber this evening is accepting amendments that actually call on the controlling body of this council to do nothing, because the effect of the amendment takes away any real action requirement for the Liberal Democrats. And, you know, although it's been said once or twice, it's worth repeating. Every one of us every single one of us goes to our neighbourhood forums. They are a venue where we are supposed to listen to what the people want to be done in their areas. And yet here we are tonight allowing the Liberal Democrats to guide us toward paying for drop curbs from that very small amount of money that neighbourhood forums get. And I regret that because, as someone quite rightly pointed out, we've set our priorities in many of the neighbourhood boards and forums, or fora perhaps I should say, and I believe that we should, in those instances, respect the decisions of our neighbourhoods. What on earth is the point of setting them up when what we're going to do is sit in here and direct the expenditure of neighbourhood fora through council motions?
Okay, going to move the original motion as amended to a vote. All those in favour of the motion as amended? That's carried. Motion 4, Councillor Graves to move, Councillor Shearer to second. Councillor Graves.
Mr Mayor, could I raise a point of order first? I'm just wondering whether we're going to have sufficient time to complete the motion, so I wonder whether we ought to move under CP 39, that if we get to 10 o'clock we extend the time of the meeting so we can complete the business.
Is that seconded? Yep. All those in favour of carrying on beyond 10 o'clock? Those against? Okay, unfortunately that's lost, so we'll... I'll just get in the pub a bit earlier, that's all, so I was trying to save myself a bit of money. Okay, motion for Councillor Graves to move, Councillor Cherry to second. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Hopefully there'll be no more Punch and Judy politics in this motion. Mr Mayor, members of the Council, I'm sure many of you have followed the story of Dave Birkinshaw, Matt Neal and their families over the last 6 months or so. When I got involved, I was extremely surprised at the antediluvian extradition laws that this country is signed up to. Latvia is one of Europe's new countries to be included in the Union. However, having experienced their authorities, it became clear early on that their practices and operation were not in any way similar to the British practices and policies. Mr Birkinshaw and Mr Neal were originally arrested and attended the court the next day. They were not provided with any translation services, but were released apparently without charge. Some 6 months later, they were sent letters in Latvian which were translated demanding a large amount of money, and so advice taken was sent to British solicitors and a barrister. That advice was to ignore those letters.
Sorry, can people stop talking so Councillor Graves can finish? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A European arrest warrant was initiated which led to a dawn raid on their respective homes by armed, serious organised crime officers and carted off to a court in London. 4 court hearings later, they were forced to go to Riga in Latvia, to prison in conditions that would not be acceptable in this country. In the meantime, I and another witness had to visit the prosecutor in Riga and give our testimony prior, I have to add, to any official charges being brought, completely against the normal course of British justice. The men were imprisoned indefinitely without having any date for a trial. In my view, it was with the interest of the media, I believe, encouraged the Latvian judicial system to speed things up. I must make a special mention, Mr Mayor, of Sean Jepson of the Derby Evening Telegraph, whose reporting highlighted this issue professionally and sympathetically, for which I am grateful. In fact, CCTV evidence shown in court clearly proves that Dave Birkinshaw, who is actually in the gallery tonight, Mr Mayor, and has waited patiently, I have to say, was assaulted by one of the dubious doormen. The footage not only shows the assault, but also that he was thrown violently across the room and could have resulted in a severe injury. Fortunately, he's tougher than that and only suffered bruising. I, like most of the British population, didn't appreciate how many people are being or have been affected by extradition rules, and more importantly, without clear justification. Members may be aware of the case of the British citizen who was extradited and imprisoned for several months until trial, only to find at the time of the offence he was not even in that country. He was told this to the British courts that were seemingly powerless to accept this fact. I have found there are many, many cases that have gone unheard because the media do not find them interesting, although each usually involve personal tragedies. This motion is not designed to prevent proper justice, because it is right that guilty people should be brought to book. Countries should have recourse to try accused parties, and it is in those cases that extradition should be used, which I believe was their original intent. However, my motion seeks to give some protection to British citizens where it is obvious that they are innocent, or where it isn't so clear that they are not imprisoned indefinitely and in many cases unnecessarily. This can be achieved by ensuring that extradition is not granted until the applicant country has provided a confirmed court hearing date and alleged offenders are extradited within a week of the trial. The motion also seeks to ensure that British courts believe that there is some evidence that alleged offenders may have committed an offence. Finally, I believe that extradition was initially introduced to ensure serious crime offenders could not hide abroad, whereas the widespread use of the treaty is now being extended for very minor offences. People may have the opinion that all offences should be considered, no matter how minor. However, I believe we have to consider the trauma and the considerable expense British people and their families go through when extradition can be applied for offences such as a parking violation. Furthermore, British taxpayers have to foot the enormous bill of sending police officers to find suspects and then arresting them and finally escorting them to airports. I was surprised when 4 SOCO officers drove from London to Derby, raided 2 family homes, frightened wives and young children, and drove all the way back. I wonder how many occasions this happens each week. It is apposite that I bring this motion to Council, as last week Mr Brokinshaw and his fiancée Rachel, who is also in the gallery, received notice that the policeman who brought the charges against the 2 Derby men and who was found to be lying has been given leave to appeal. This means in Latvian law they must, at their own expense, attend another court in Riga and pay another £1,000 each for the services of a solicitor. This will involve more time from their employ, putting at risk their jobs. Worse still, the anxiety this puts the family through will continue through to next February or March, and will certainly have an effect over the Christmas period. I also understand that Mr Birkinshaw and Miss G have postponed for the second time their impending wedding. There is also the case of Gary McKinnon and his extradition, which is a prominent national story and highlights just how often extradition is being used. Mr Mayor, members of the Council, I grew up believing that I would be protected by my own country in all sorts of areas, and especially against the erroneous claims of foreign countries. Unfortunately, we are all subject to these unfair extradition rules. An annoying fact is that the same rules seem to protect visitors staying in or hiding in Britain better than our own people. For the sake of Mr Birkinshaw, Mr Neil, the citizens of Derby and all British people, I commend this motion to Council.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Carr. Councillor Carr. Is it working now? Yeah. Yeah.
It is. Okay. So
sorry, do you want to use the other one?
I do support this motion, but I think it will be difficult for a lot of the points for the government, because of a lot of the points that Councillor Graves has raised. Extradition within the EU isn't controlled by a treaty, as it appears to imply by the motion, but, as Alan said, Councillor Graves, a European arrest warrant. That was defined by a framework directive which was enacted into British law in January 2004. And what that does is it removes any political element within the EU, that is, doesn't apply to other countries, so that only the courts are involved, and the requesting country does not have to show any evidence, only that a warrant has been properly sworn, again, as Councillor Graves said. It would therefore be for the government to find a way to advise the courts of the unease expressed in this motion. As I said, I support this motion, but can I suggest that it would better reflect our sentiments if it was amended? It's a very simple amendment, and I can say what it is while it's taking that round. Basically, it consists of the deletion of the word innocent, because we're all innocent unless we're proven guilty, and change people at the end to citizens.
Is that seconded? Yep. Okay.
Again, I'd like to pick up the point. I know that Councillor Graves has requested this motion because of particular incidents that have happened, but I think there are also much wider implications because, as was mentioned, there are other extradition treaties that are somewhat unfair, particularly in the case of a British citizen who's been extradited to America on fairly specious grounds because we can't do anything about the treaty. So on a number of counts, I would say that we should support this amendment.
The amendment is the deletion of the words innocent and people at the end of the second paragraph and the insertion of the words citizens instead of people.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to accept the amendment.
Okay. All those in favour? Yes. Yep.
Perhaps, I mean, it might be a small, but I think significant point, but we're not British citizens, we're British subjects. Well,
are you happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll put that to the vote. Yeah. All those in favour of the amendment? That's carried. Back to the original motion. Did you want to speak on the? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Banwait. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a few words, certainly in terms of my involvement. David Birkinshaw is my constituent, and I got to hear about this following a phone call from my brother, who works very closely with David Birkinshaw, and alerted to me to the plight of both David and his family, and also Matthew Neal of Chelliston Ward. I spoke to David and really said, look, although slightly outside of my area of expertise, I'm not a lawyer. I've got no insight into, I do not claim to have any expertise in the extradition process, but again, one of those issues that as an elected member, I felt duty bound to do whatever I could to support the concerns of David Birkinshaw and his family, and resolved to do all I could. And one of the things that we discussed, the strategy I put, was to alert it in the public domain as a way of clearly making the case as transparent as possible, with the idea and the strategy that it would certainly put under pressure the authorities over in Latvia without actually jeopardising, and that's a key point, without actually saying anything or doing anything to jeopardise the case over there, but to make sure that lawyers would be under the spotlight there. And we did that through a petition, by starting a petition of over 1,500 people in support of their case. And may I add, the press release that the Telegraph instigated, I know Councillor Graves has thanked Sean Jepson, was actually instigated from myself as a result of the strategy we agreed. And that strategy has worked to a degree, but clearly what now does upset me is the fact that they've now having to go back to face a trial as a result of appeal, and that's not acceptable. So, although there are certain reservations with this motion in terms of the fact that I'm not an extradition expert, and the extradition process is clearly in place to protect both sides, I welcome the spirit of this, and I wouldn't want any other family to find themselves in a similar situation. And my heart and all my support and service as an elected member goes out and is available to both David Birkinshaw and Matthew Neal. And I would like to make the final point, again, without The Conservatives again. Matthew Neal is a Conservative resident. Where have they been on that issue? Again, totally out at sea. Again, more rhetoric, more party posturing. So, thank you, Alan.
Let's not make a political issue out of it. So, we've got Councillor Shearer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this amendment. I think it is totally unacceptable to be extradited for trivial crime. I think extradition should only be granted after some thorough investigation by your government, and when the British courts are satisfied that there is a valid reason for extradition in regard to charges and the date is set for hearing, only when somebody should be sent. This will stop people being imprisoned unnecessarily, and this will stop families being put through unnecessary distress and anxiety. I know there's been an appeal. I mean, it's going to be going through, they can appeal again, and the family would have to go back again. And it's extra cost, and it's distress to the family, and of course they might end up losing their jobs. I mean, which if they've been proven not guilty once, why should they have to go back and face the retrial again? I support this amendment. I support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This shouldn't take very long. I do hope that people will accept this in the spirit it's intended. On page 6, in the third line, it says, in a prison described as inhabitable, and I believe it should be uninhabitable. And if you'll accept that as an amendment, I'll move it.
I don't think there'll be any problem with that.
Well, I didn't know whether it was a typographical error or whether Councillor Graves had made a glaring mistake. I couldn't believe that, really.
Councillor Dinser. I've got Councillor Dinser, Councillor Harwood, and then I'll move it to the vote, yeah? Councillor Dinser.
I just formally second that because I was going to just make the same point, so I don't need to speak any further.
Councillor Harwood, and then I'll bring back to Councillor Graves to sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, well, I obviously support this as well, and send my condolences to the family about this unpleasant experience. Quite honestly, what I'm upset about is that our government haven't appeared to be in on this. There's certainly our local MP, Margaret Beckett, has not seen fit, as far as I'm aware, to make any representations to her government, and I think this is sadly lacking. I'd like to think that Mrs. Beckett will take this matter to the government and get this unfair adjustment sorted out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Graves, would you like to sum up and before we move it to the vote?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't take long. I did hope that this wouldn't become a party political match. This is a serious issue affecting people in this city. 2 of them are up there. And it can affect further people in this city and also in Britain. I do think it's a very important issue, and I'm very pleased that I have all cross-party support on this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I commend this motion to Council.
Okay. All those in favour of the motion as amended? That's carried. Okay, motion 5, Councillor Williams to move, Councillor Dinser to second.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Williamson has had to leave for another engagement. I mean, could I request an indulgence of the Council chamber to defer this to the next Council meeting? Would that be sport?
Are you in favour of that, deferring it to the next meeting? Yep. All those in favour? Okay,
Thank you very
let's
much.
move to the next meeting. Motion 6, Councillor Holmes to move, Councillor Ingle to second.
Could I, Mr. Mayor, perhaps raise a point of order before we kick off with this? Because I'm a little bit like Councillor Hickson in I think I have an ability to amend motions, and looked at this and thought I couldn't possibly do it. But could I raise the point, perhaps, and ask Mr. Foote to give us an opinion in the same way that Councillor Hickson did? Because I don't believe that even if we carried this motion, it would be enforceable, and on that basis, as a pious motion, it's not really something we should debate.
Mr. Mayor, if this motion were to be approved, it would go to the Planning and Control Committee, to consider the procedures involved, consider a detailed report, I believe, and then decide which scheme could be implemented and which of these recommendations could actually be implemented and how they could be implemented. All that would be included in a report to the Planning and Control Committee. So the actual details in here don't necessarily have to be enforceable. That will be considered in detail by the report going to the Planning Control Committee.
Mr Mayor, in the interest of brevity and to try and save the Derby taxpayers some money, we don't really want to have a special meeting after this meeting just to consider the remaining business. So in the interest of brevity, we will withdraw motion 6 and take it to the next council meeting with council's approval.
Everybody in favour of that? Yep. Okay, item 7. Councillor Latham to move, Councillor Davies to second.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I brought this to the council because I went with you out with the street pastors the night before Halloween. Fortunately for us, it was quite a quiet night. Mind you, there were lots dressed in Halloween costumes, so it's sometimes difficult to be able to work out who had fake blood and who had real blood needing treatment. But I think that the street pastors do a fantastic job helping the police and the doorkeepers to do their jobs without being taken away from those jobs by looking after fairly minor things, sometimes quite major, by calling ambulances for them. They treat people who need their help, whether it's because they had too much to drink, whether they've been knocked over, been in a fight, whether they need a taxi, whether they've lost their shoes, or they couldn't walk after standing in such high heels for such a long evening, and they give them flip-flops and help them find their way, get their way home safely. They might provide them with plasters or put a dressing on a wound, and if it is too much for them, they do get hold of the ambulance service, as you know, to help the people out there, most of whom are having a good time and enjoying themselves. And I feel that they've worked very, very hard in their first year, and as you know, they got the Community Achievement Award, which was well deserved. So I'd like this council to support them. We do give them some funding, and I would like to see that continue. They are all volunteers, and although they're called street pastors, not once did I feel that they were preaching at anybody, telling them anything about God or religion. It wasn't about that. It's about doing Christian duty and going out and helping people and helping them to help themselves and get home safely. So I feel that as a council we should be supporting this, and I'd like to urge any other councillors to go out with them. They would welcome that because they want us to see the results of the legislation that we carry through with the, and I know that Margaret Redfern has been out with them and they were very grateful for that. So I'd like to see more of us volunteering to go out. We actually went out from 10 till about 1 o'clock, and because it wasn't busy, we actually had the opportunity to learn more about what they do than we would have done if we'd gone out the next night, which was incredibly busy because it was Halloween. So I would like to pass the, or suggest that this motion is passed. I also know that we do have this scheme going out into other areas of Derby, and I welcome that because it's going to make more and more people safe. Certainly I don't think it's going to be coming to Oakwood because we don't have a big drinking problem there. But I do feel that the areas that it's going into will help. Also, just for the avoidance of any doubt, although Councillor Williamson has gone, I have not driven and do not drive a four-wheel drive. So I'd hope that he will, you will report that back to him, the rest of his group. But this is a very positive thing. We've had a pretty awful meeting tonight with lots of people disagreeing. I think that this is the final motion on the paper, and I hope that we will be able to all support it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll just reiterate that. I mean, we went out, say, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I went out with the police a couple of weeks ago as well. And what a great service that they do, you know, all voluntary, unpaid. They do every Friday, Saturday night till 4 in the morning. And really highly thought of by the police and all the door stuff. So, Councillor Dinser and then Councillor Redfern. Councillor
Thank you, Mr.
Dinsmore.
Mayor. Can I say I totally agree with everything Councillor Latham has said regarding the street pastures. We've had discussions on our neighbourhood board, and we are having them coming to Normanton Ward, and I understand they are going to Sinfin Ward and Alveston Ward, where there's the sort of needs that are in the city centre, which has been celebrated and recognised with awards, are prevalent. So I totally support everything you've said, and our group would support the motion. If I may indulge the council, to recognise that they are actually working outside the city centre, if we could add that to the first paragraph and put and celebrates expansion of the work of the street passage into Normanton, Sinfin and Alveston wards. And if Councillor Latham would be happy to accept that, that would actually enhance and sort of bring up to date this motion in terms of recognising the work that's being done.
Yeah, I think that's very welcomed as well. I think that was on in the cards for doing that as well, isn't it? So, Councillor Redfern.
I think, Mr Mayor, I was just going to say that I think we're happy to accept that amendment,
Okay.
because we don't have many minutes left.
Councillor Redfern.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I did go out with the street pastors, and it really was an eye-opener. What is an angel at 8 o'clock becomes a manic devil with 10 pints of lager inside him at 12 o'clock.
You've been following me around town again, Councillor Redfern.
And these people actually go in to the streets and they talk to people, because their main aim is to keep them safe and to get them home safely. And another award that's been given is to the Community Safety Partnership with Mark Kennell. And the street pastors and the taxi marshals have all contributed to that prestigious award that Derby has got. And I think it's all too easy to say that we don't do anything, we don't care. When you actually get down to it, people have got free will and free choice, and they can choose to drink as much or as little as they like. But we do have a responsibility to keep the people who pass through the city, who work through the city, who just want to enjoy the city, we have a responsibility to keep those safe as well. I welcome this motion, and thank you very much for bringing it. It's really, really worthwhile.
There's been a few people who want to speak, but I'll just bring Councillor Winter in and I'll move it to the vote. I'm just conscious of the time. So,
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Just to say that D Division, as Councillor Latham spoke about, D Division held an awards ceremony on the 21st of October this year, which yourself attended, Mr Mayor, celebrating residents who had done community achievements and obviously citizens who had achieved outstanding work within our communities. And obviously the outright winners were the street pastors, and well deserved. Now, just to go back to, obviously Councillor Redfern went out with the street pastors, and they've done sterling work, and obviously yourself, Councillor Latham, and Maggie and myself went out in February on a very cold night, and we did 10 till, was it 10 till 2? 10 till 3, wow. But sterling work the street pastors do, and we fully endorse what they're doing, their work. And obviously work now that they're doing into lots of our neighbourhoods, and Austin Estate being one of them. So, well deserved. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Would you like to sum up or move it to the vote?
Council's accepted.
We've accepted it. I mean, it's cross-party, I think. So.
I just want to say that the reason for bringing this is that we have lots of unsung heroes in the city, but this particular service really does help the people of Derby, the police of Derby and the doorkeepers, who these days are very, very well trained, but it stops them being taken away from their duties. And these people treat people so politely and handle them so diplomatically. I mean, you and I saw a particularly difficult incident with the lady wanting to get into a taxi, well, not wanting to get into a taxi, and nobody wanting to take her home because she was being difficult. But these people really do help the citizens of Derby, and I think we should remember that as and when we are considering funding for people to help in the city in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all those in favour? That's carried. Okay, that ends the meeting, so have a safe journey home.